of what holds you back? These are the stories of those fighting that battle. It might also be the story of you. I'm Dan Waldschmidt, author of Edgy Conversations and strategist of billion-dollar companies all over the world. This is Mark Minard, author of The Story of You, the guy who knows a thing or two about never giving up. You're listening to Elevating Beyond. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Elevating Beyond with a two-word mission statement: change lives. And before I introduce today's guest, whichever camera shows the book, just be prepared, because I'm not gonna be hitting the foghorn like every 10 seconds. When I have to say the title of the book, there's just no getting around. Do the fucking work. There's no getting around it. I'm not gonna just every time I bring it up have to hit that. So I'm here with author of Do the Fucking Work, Lowbrow Advice. It actually feels good to be able to say it and justify, like, hey, it's the cover of the book. Lowbrow Advice for High-Level Creativity, with one of the founders of it's GFDA, right?
Yep, that's correct.
And authors of I'll try it once for y'all. F-bomb work. Brian, I'm going to say right, Buirge, because it's like Surge.
Right, exactly.
How's it going, man?
It's going pretty good. How about you?
It's going good. It's going good. This has been cool being able to have you like fly in yesterday and hang out and have time to like talk about a lot.
Yeah, I like how I ask, like, how are you? Like, we haven't just been talking for the last 2 hours. You got to like set this precedent for the podcast. Like, oh,
yes,
we just happened to
we're
sit
just
down
meeting.
and having this casual conversation.
You just came in live. First time seeing you ever. Yeah, you weren't. Edit that out, everyone. You weren't really here. But no, what's awesome. So I've actually already been talking about this just organically on the show. My neighbor told me about your book, and I remember telling you, Brian, at first I was like, oh, it's not on Audible. Like, oh man, I don't have time to buy an actual physical book. Then it's the best thing you can ever do, because as we'll get more in depth, like, not only is their whole story intertwined in it, which is inspiring, but just like all the visuals, each thing, it's like, could be a poster. It's a visual masterpiece, which goes back to what you do. So just kind of been looking at some of those pictures of the wind chimer, the place that you guys lived in, just kind of bringing it back to like the story before you guys had the book. And so you guys are like, you're broke students in grad school.
Yes.
And at that time, did GFDA even exist like as a business, or did you just start thinking, let's come up with some different stuff because nothing was really out with cuss words, and it's like your brand, it was like motivational, like cuss word type.
Yeah, I'll do my best to give the abridged version of the story. And for those of you listening, watching, if you want the full story, you can buy the book.
Yeah. Oh, you have to buy the book.
Because part of the book, aside from the design advice, is a bit of the narrative of the first few years of the company. But to give you the verbal version, my then business partner, Jason Bacher, and I, we were graduate students at Kent State University. This is in 2010. And he and I were both... we were teaching classes as part of our experience in grad school, working with undergrads, and he and I were both teaching largely classes, at least initially, that were like how to use Photoshop and basic Adobe products, because you can't screw students up too much if you don't teach them the technology, correctly.
Right.
Versus like, once we were a little bit more seasoned and experienced, then we were allowed to teach like the design principle classes and work with upperclassmen. But at least initially, like software and technology changes so quickly. So if it's a good place to cut your teeth on the education experience. So, Jason was teaching an early morning class, which is also, when you're a graduate student, you don't get those prime like 10 a.m., 2 p.m. classes. It's like the 7 o'clock in the morning class that nobody wants to be in, to teach, to do, So So we would often, in the first couple weeks of the semester, we would like grab coffee afterwards. He would finish his class at like 9, and we'd go take a walk to the student center and just shoot the shit and
Yeah.
talk about whatever in graduate school. And so for whatever reason, on this particular day, we decided we were going to walk to the off-campus Starbucks, and we were talking and we were joking about how difficult it is to hold your students' attention, particularly if you're teaching how to use Photoshop at 7 o'clock in the morning to a bunch of freshmen or sophomores.
Right.
And and so since it was a longer walk, we always joked when we gave presentations that it was the longer walk that gave us that extra little bit of time to arrive at this idea. But there were, at the time, there were websites like What the Fuck Should I Eat for Dinner, and that we weren't entirely original in that sense, but nobody had done it for like design or motivation the way that we ended up doing it. So we were walking back and said like, well, we could make a website where students could submit their work and get feedback or something. And that would certainly be nice, but that's a huge technological leap.
Right.
And it was like, well, we could just offer some basic design axioms like, don't procrastinate, or make the logo smaller, or any number of different random things. And
What was the idea to start like like posters or like prints, or
no, it was,
so that
there
hadn't
was
even come
there was
about
there
yet?
was no business intent whatsoever. It was just like, well, could we make a website that students would visit to, like, it sounds super serious, but like enhance their educational experience. It was just like,
But this was back when, just to let everyone know too, like websites weren't, like everyone didn't have a website
right. So
too. So like you know what I mean? It was like harder. Like you could, like Wix, for example, they didn't just
Right,
have all
yeah.
the it actually took knowing like some programming stuff to build
yeah,
a
yeah.
website.
And we were definitely, had enough knowledge to be dangerous in that realm. So anyways, we came up with this idea like, well, we could just, we could do those lists of like pieces of design advice, and, you could click, and every time you click, it would like show you a different one, and it would just generate randomly. But nonetheless, we were like, well, we can't get our students to pay attention to us in class. Why would they take the extra step of going to a website?
Huh.
And then, one of us said, well, what if we just put some profanity in there? And we
That's
were
how
like,
it started.
so we would call it good fucking design advice. And we both,
That's GFDA.
right. So we just kind of laughed about the ridiculousness of the idea, but we both, we were kind of excited about the general thing. And so we ran back to the graduate studio, and during the course of, the day, we kind of, we like took our desks, and, that thing where you take your forearm and you just shove everything off, and you're like, okay, let's get to work. And so we built the first iteration of the website. It was a single page. It just had, I think, 25 pieces of advice on there. All of them had the F word integrated somehow.
Yeah.
And then we launched it, and it wasn't, again, there was no business intent. It was just like, we're blowing off steam. Grad school is stressful. There's a lot of work. We're trying to figure out how to work with students. And
Right.
it was just kind of a fun project that we enjoyed. Like, we were a couple of, 10-year-old boys.
Sure.
And, we launched it, and then by we launched it at like 5 o'clock. And then by the time we came back and looked at the analytics, which was like midnight, we had like, I think it was 600 people that visited our website in like, 7 hours. And there was no like promotion or anything. We just
Yeah.
like posted it on Facebook, and we were like, oh, is this thing like, it's just Google Analytics, but you're like, did they set up the thing right? Like, there's no way.
And that's a lot more excuse me, like less common even back then too. Like now there's so, like, everyone has more access to social media and everything than they
Yeah.
did back then. So to put something out and that quickly have 600 eyes on it as like two kids
Yeah.
in grad school when websites were kind of like just starting to be a thing.
Yeah, and when I used to give lectures, the joke that I would make, which feels at this point really contrived, but I'll say it anyways, is like, when you're a design student in particular, and you have your own personal website because you're gonna showcase your work, you're hoping to find a job when you graduate, all that stuff. It's kind of like, you're thrilled if 5 people in a month visit your website,
Right.
because it's like, who's, no one's like looking for you. It's more just something to hold your information to put out for, job search, etc.
Yeah.
And of those 5 people that visit your website, one of them is you because you've got to check
Yeah.
to make sure it's on, and
Right.
another one is mom because it's mom, and mom likes to check in on you,
Yeah.
and really, like, you're down to 3, but then another visit is mom at work showing all the nice ladies that she works with, so you're down to like 2 and some change. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so for us in one night to see that there were like 600 people that organically visit our website, we're like, whoa, what did
That's
we do?
awesome.
And so then for like the next 2 or 3 days, we just went about our normal like activities. But at the end of every day, Jason and I would meet at the graduate studio. At the time, we weren't living together. We would just kind of like become friends, acquaintances. And we at midnight we would look and see like what the numbers were for the day. So the second day it was like 6,000 people. We're like,
Wow.
oh, holy shit. And then the third day it was like 75,000.
That's crazy.
And so it was like, it just like accelerated really quickly. It was really interesting to see, the viral nature of that. And so by the third day and, into the first like week since launch, then we started getting emails that were requests for product. So it was like, oh, I'd love to have, a t-shirt with this on it, or a coffee mug or a poster or whatever. And so, we decided like, oh, well, let's try to make some of those things.
I'll show them a t-shirt right here. I markered out.
There.
Not really.
You can't read it anymore. It's safe, family friendly.
But yeah, there's to everyone listening, you want to right there. It's see, I can't do it takes, like I said, we're not censoring this show. It takes fucking, and it has talent crossed out and says tenacity, which is so true. That's why I got the shirt. I love it. It speaks my language. But yeah, go ahead. There's an example years later of the product and purchased.
Yeah. So yeah, we decided that we were going to do, at least initially, we were going to do t-shirts and posters. And that ended up being a whole calamity. We didn't, again, we had no intention of starting a business. So, there was no like startup capital or anything. We were like, how are we going to make this? We were barely getting by as graduate students. And, we had like, since we were teaching, we had a little bit of a stipend, and, Jason and I both, had some professional experience at that point and would do some freelance, or, he had worked with some agencies in Cleveland, and, me being from Pittsburgh, I had done some work with agencies there. And so, every once in a while, if they had like, an excess amount of work, we'd get contacted, and, you do a little project and, make a little money, and then you kind of like sustain yourself on that for a few months. And it was sort of that spotty time in life of like, you had troughs and valleys of your income, and, rent wasn't super expensive, so it wasn't a big deal. But, in any case, we certainly didn't have the money to invest in making product. And we had, practically no knowledge of how to make it. I mean, being from a design background, we had familiarity with what the process of screen printing is to make either posters through a screen printed process, or like t-shirts, but
not like the like, oh, if they buy this for X amount, it's going to cost this much. And here's gross. And it was like, because I love you guys go through it and break it all down, which is so for anyone that does anything with business, with creativity, of like literally learning along the way, because there really isn't any other way to do it. There's never going to be perfect conditions. And you guys had, I remember there was like one moment in the book where it was almost like, I don't remember, it was like the day before or something, you had to have a big like thing of orders together, and something happened where like the whole batch got screwed up.
Oh,
and
yeah,
you guys
yeah.
like because like anyone listening and stuff or and watching knows like these are not abnormal situations that you get in. You just find out like, what am I going to do to get through this? Like,
yeah. Well, we started off, we surprisingly, in a college town, there were plenty of places to have t-shirts made. So that part was largely fairly easy, but getting posters printed, not so much. At least posters the way that we wanted to do it, which was like a screen printed method versus going to like an offset printer, which is, what you would normally go if you were having like a magazine or a book or whatever printed. Partly because we, with that sort of thing, you need to have a high quantity of product that you're making. So,
for it to be even like profitable, really, too, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. A friend of Jason's recommended. He's like, well, bands will do like a pre-sale of their album, and that gives them the funds necessary to produce the album or whatever. And so he's like, you guys should do that. So that was basically what we did. We put up a pre-sale on the website. We created a shop page and posters and T-shirts, but we didn't have like the actual physical products. So fortunately, we have a design background, so we did like mock-ups of them. Like, this is what it would look like. So we sold people pixels and math, not actual photographs of the products.
Yeah.
And we took T-shirts and we just put the text on them in Photoshop, and same with the posters. And we launched the site. We didn't know what to charge for the product, so we sort of looked around and said like, oh, okay, well, everybody's selling T-shirts for like $25 or $30, whatever it was at the time. And similarly with the posters, we're like, well, we'll charge around like $25, $30 for that. And we didn't know what to charge for shipping, so we again just looked around at other websites that were selling that. And
That's smart though.
it's like, oh, $5 for US shipping and $10 for international shipping. And that was of course like 15 years ago. So
Right.
It's way different now, unfortunately. But it was like, okay, well, that was we didn't even try to like take an address in Denmark and then go to the post office and say, what would it cost to ship like
You were just
1
like,
pound? It was
they
like,
want to order from there. Oh, it's coming. Yeah.
yeah. So it was like,
I had that happen with Australia once with my book, and I was so excited, and I'm like, oh my God, they want, and then I like shipped it and sent it, and I was like, dude, I think I just lost like $75.
Right, exactly. Yeah, Australia is a bitch when it comes to that sort of thing, and it's super expensive to ship there. So this is like October of 2010, and we figured it's towards the end of October, and we figured like, okay, well, it'll take us a month to kind of get ourselves organized, to get the posters made, and the shirts in stock, and all of that. And we also need, like, the money has to come in. We don't know how many we're going to make. We're going to decide the quantity of posters and shirts to print based upon at least the initial 2 weeks of orders, and then we can get that in there. But I mean, we had the art all ready to go. So we had found a T-shirt vendor that we liked in the walking distance from the university and our respective apartments. And a friend of a friend did screen printing, and so we showed him the artwork, and he was like, yeah, I could do this, no problem. We got a month. And so then we would, like, as time went on, we would follow up with him, because he's just like a student. He's just, he's not like a professional shop. He just has the experience. And, every week we'd reach out to him like, hey, how's the print going? I think we decided, based on some initial orders, that we were going to do like 400 prints.
Okay.
And that would sort of round out like, more than we needed. And then obviously we wanted to continue selling them after the fact. And I think that ultimately, the combination of shirts and posters, we had like 10 grand in roughly, in like startup. Capital.
Which is, when you're broke college, even anyone, but like broke grad school students, like that's no
we were like, oh, holy shit, this is the most amount of money I've ever seen in my life. It's like, and it's in my PayPal account.
I'm in debt for yeah.
So but every week that we reached out to this friend, it was like, oh yeah, I'm working on it. It's coming along. It's no problem. And then we got to like a week out and we hadn't seen anything. And like we've the 400 posters included some overage, so we had like 300 and some to send out all over the world.
And this is like, it's also like your first starting to really launch this, so your reputation's always on the line. But this is like,
and
dude,
also
we're having demand. Like, we've got to get these, or else they're gonna just totally blow us off.
Right. And we also put our names at the bottom of the poster, so it was like if we really mess this up, like this is gonna stick with us, So like the week before we have to ship them out, we had promised all the people that did pre-orders that we were going to send them out on Black Friday. And so we were like, this is like a week and a half before that, towards the end of November. And finally our friend called us. I remember we were in class, and it was like an evening class, and he called Jason, and Jason like went out and kind of like motioned to me, like made a face or something. And so then I followed out, politely excused myself, and we like, hey man, like, how's it going? And then he was like crying on the other line, like, I can't do this, I can't get it right. And we're
Oh,
like,
no.
oh my God, like, what are we gonna do? We've got 10 days to get this sorted out,
Yeah, yeah.
and like,
And people had already paid you.
right, and
It was
deadlines be
like,
damned, like, we're not gonna miss a deadline. Like,
yeah.
that's like, our background and experience, that's like the last thing that you would do. So then it was like this mad scramble of like, okay, well, what are we gonna do? And we went to the grad studio for the printmaking majors and tried to find somebody there. And in the process of screen printing, you need the screen, and not to get all the technical information, but you need the screen. You burn the screen, and that's what you pull, like with a squeegee, the ink through onto the paper, or shirt, if that's what you're doing.
I remember in like 8th grade art
Yeah,
doing having a project where we had the old screen and like the wooden, like, I think we used like an old window frame or something. It had this. It was
Yeah.
like not the. I tried to do like the Batman symbol or something. Didn't work out. So like bled through, but
Yeah. So, we had we had ordered, we like overnighted 2 screens, and we worked with like an older woman who was a printmaking grad student to make the screen. And it was a different type of emulsion. That's what you put on there and expose the light to get everything. And it was like different than what she had worked with before. And I mean, there's, within screen printing, there's multiple approaches and methods, but the overall principle is ultimately the same. And
right.
so when we tried to do that, and also like our posters, unlike say a fine art print, it was just the typography. So it had to be really crisp and clean. It couldn't be like, oh, it's this edgy, skateboarding poster, and it's like ink splotches here and it doesn't matter. It has to be this like black, white, very crisp, very specific execution, which is, screen printing is like the worst thing for something that's, you want precise down to like, the fine details.
Like these types fonts, right?
Right.
Yeah. I'm holding it. So if you're listening, you're going to have to watch this on YouTube. You're going to want it. The video is always awesome, but I'm showing you a page from the actual book that's giving an example of the fonts he's talking about. Actually, backing up exactly what you're talking about, which I have the horn here. Don't make fucking like that excuses, which is obviously what I love the book, because like this page is like a poster and it's motivating, but then he'll go into like the story that you're sharing right now where you couldn't make excuses. You didn't make some people would,
right?
But it's we got to hit this deadline.
Yeah,
like, what's the other option?
We had to figure it out. So, anyways, the woman that we had tried to work with wasn't working for us. So then we ended up going to the guy who screen printed our shirts and asked him if he would like burn the screens. We would do the work of printing the posters ourselves, but we needed the screen done because we didn't have all the technical capabilities or equipment or whatever, or know-how for that matter. And he agreed. It was like the Thursday before, a week before Thanksgiving. So Black Friday is, for those of you that are international United States, like Black Friday is the day after Thanksgiving. So,
yeah.
So we went to him, and I remember it was like pouring rain, and we have these 2 screens, and we took them in, and he did the work, and we brought them out. And we had another friend who had some experience doing the actual printing, though he had never burnt screens. And so he said like, hey, you could come and do this in my basement. Like, he and his wife had just moved into a new house. So they had like, we went in and we saw his basement, and I mean, we're like shoulder to shoulder,
right.
Like there's not a lot of space, but we set up 2 sawhorses and the screen and a board. And on Friday we got to work, and we did a 3-day nonstop printing marathon with 2 of our other friends from graduate school. And so we would the poster was it's not to get into all the technical details, but basically it's like 4 separate colors, and so between each color the ink has to dry before you can do the next one. So you use the exact same screen, but basically you put the paper down, you put the screen over top, you squeegee the ink through, you pick the screen up, you take the paper out, and then it's got to sit and dry for, I don't remember the specific amount of time, but 30 minutes to an hour. So
it's not just like, oh, we can just crank out 40 of these in one and done. It's like,
right. It's like
there's a step for each part of it.
Right.
Then
so
it has to dry.
A little bit of math, but it's like 400 prints. You've got 4 inks. That's 1,600 times through the printer. So it's like, basically Jason would.
And how much time did you have, like, at this point, give or take?
This was the weekend before Black Friday. So we had, we started Friday night and we went until Sunday night,
Wow.
with literally no sleep, and
Yeah,
lots of
yeah.
coffee, lots of Red Bull. There's no way in my life I could do that now unless I was like,
Yeah, yeah,
on the front lines or something. But
yeah.
like it was
You have to do what you have to do in those. I've been
it was rough.
I had it happen where I worked so it was 3 days is where I was coming home from Dreamshine, like, really it was before we went to Africa,
Mhm.
and I was gonna take a full month off, which I had never done in my life with my company.
Yeah.
This was, like, 7 years into owning it, and I had so much to get done before I was able to really,
Mhm.
like, be and I did that too just to get everything as set as I possibly could, and it was 3 days awake straight working,
Yeah.
and I was driving home late at night, and it's, like, in the woods in the log, and I all of a sudden, I saw someone sitting in my front seat,
Mhm.
like, and I screamed. I was like, "What the like, and I was like, and I pulled over, and the person and I was hallucinating. I was starting to
Right. Right.
hallucinate, and I remember I was, like, praying, like, "God, like, please just get me home, like,
Yeah.
just get me home, and I promise you, like, I'll sleep. Like, I don't wanna die from like, I'm
Yeah.
all about the grind and working hard, but I always am like, when you start hallucinating, like,
Yeah.
I flat, like, is dead like, saw someone in my, like,
Mhm.
passenger seat
Mhm.
and and, like but yeah, it was crazy. I don't really remember getting home, and I didn't drink or any, like, alcohol, like, bunch
Yeah.
of coffee. But so, yeah, I know, I feel you. Like, it's crazy, but,
Yeah.
like, what we do, but what it takes.
Yeah, yeah. So we managed to get all of that done, which was a miracle in and of itself. And then so when for those of you listening and watching that aren't familiar with like a poster or just a general printing process, like you print on a larger piece of paper than what the final what we would call finish size is. So it has to be cut out.
Right.
And that's how you get what's called bleeds, which is where ink goes off the edge, and you've got if you use like a normal like offset or inkjet printer rather, like you usually have like a border or something that you like can't get rid of, so you have to like you would trim that down. So we printed these posters on 19 by 25 paper, and this final size of the print is 18 by 24. So you basically have to take a half inch off all four sides.
Oh, wow.
And so we've got the 400 and whatever prints done, but we need to cut them out. And we hadn't slept. Like we went home Sunday night, went to bed, like finally, like okay. And
Yeah.
fortunately, we were smart enough to not think like, oh, well, we'll just take an X-Acto blade out and cut each one of these out. That's not smart. Somebody's gonna lose like a
After
whole.
3 days and no sleep
Yeah,
too.
like you just come out with your nub, like you just lost your hand. Like how'd that happen? Like I just slowly chopped away
We
at each
got
of
the
my
delivery
fingers.
on time. Yeah, the posters are just, like, covered in blood and stuff, but
Yeah. So we had a contact at a print company up in Cleveland, and they were nice enough to say like, oh yeah, you just bring them up and we can put them on our press and just like cut them like
yeah.
all at once, like you would if you had like gone there and hired them to do your printing. And the guy who chopped them mm, chopped like he did like top side, left side, bottom side, and then spun the half of them the wrong way and chopped the left side again. So he ruined like 200 of them.
This is what I remember from the book, like, this part of it, like,
Yeah.
after why I love this so much, and everyone, you need to get this book, so many listening entrepreneurs, whatever you're doing, it's like, there's always like, the journey of 1,000 miles, they say, begins with a first step, but I'm like,
Mhm.
"That's awesome," but what about when you make it to mile 900, which
Mm.
is, like, what I'd use in this example? Oh my, we busted out the 3 days straight, no sleep, we got then boom, like, all of a sudden, 200 of them now just got screwed up out of the 400, and I'm like, that punches you back to mile, like, 200,
Yeah.
and you've just so the journey of, like, 1,000 miles, you actually end up doing, like, 10,000 miles,
Mhm.
because it's like, great, take that first step. That's hard to do, but that's when so many people really give up is when, like, okay, now we're down to 200. we're just gonna have to write everyone and be like, we're so sorry. We're gonna have to,
Yeah.
But what did you guys do?
Well, so that was that was Monday. And so basically, I mean, we were just like, we were so tired, even though we had, slept the night before, and we were just stunned. Like, I mean, we didn't get angry or upset or anything. It was just like, okay, well, thanks. We'll take these 200 that are cut properly. And
There's like no time to really be angry even.
yeah, like maybe, okay, take these other ones that are completely ruined and cut them into 4x6, and we'll just use them as like thank you cards for something, and we'll take those back. So we got back sometime that afternoon, and then ordered, had paper overnighted from the same paper company that we were using. And so that showed up on Tuesday, and then had contacted our friend who helped us with the screen printing in his basement. And we went back Tuesday night. And, at this point we had our process, we had really nailed our process down. And he actually had gotten a rack the previous day that he had ordered for storage. So there were a bunch of things that happened in the course of like 48 hours that was able to expedite our process. So he and I Tuesday afternoon hunkered down, and we printed the 200, and that didn't take as long for a variety of reasons. So that ended up being like 12
cranking out
hours or so.
So technically you had to make like 600
Yes.
in that short of a time. Like the reason, again, it's like people don't see that side or hear that side of like the story. Like they see this book now, like published, real publisher out, like, but they don't see that back of like it almost didn't even get past like the first print,
Right.
like they
Yeah,
almost
yeah.
didn't make it out, and you had to do 600 versus 400, because when people make excuses like, but I can't make this deadline, it's like, yes you can.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and then the other part that we hadn't really thought too deeply about. I mean, because all of this is, as we talked about to start, it's like you're just learning as you go. Like,
Right.
oh well, we have to ship all of these too. It's not like the posters are printed great and then they just sit somewhere. Like you have to roll all those posters and put them into tube, and then
Address them.
put a mailing label on them, and then take them to the post office, and then stand in line at the post office as they key in, very slowly.
Oh
each
God.
one.
I got to where I hated the post office so much for a while.
So on Friday we did that. Like after Thanksgiving, we came back.
So true. They're so slow.
And we like did all of those posters, and we spent hours doing that and sent them out, and we were just completely exhausted from the whole thing. We got everything out, and we were like, okay, well, thank God, that was done. And it was like, okay, well, now we're in business. And that was how it started. So that was like September. We started the business, quote unquote, made the website mid-September 2010. And this is like end of November. So
Wow.
It's 2.5 months basically to that point.
So then did you already start to have like more orders come in, or did you get feedback from, because you had what was it, like $10,000 worth of as college kids already, like 10,000. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, most of that went into the production of everything. And
Of
in
course.
particular, because we had also like screwed up so much along the way.
You probably
and,
lost.
It was like, that we,
Yeah.
Same thing actually with our shirts. I was incorrect now that I'm thinking through the story again. We didn't initially hire a professional screen printer. The same person that was going to do our posters was also going to do the shirts. And so what we ended up having to do was like, I don't remember how many shirts we sold. I'm going to guess maybe 100, 200. It was less than the posters. But we had to have the t-shirt printer, who also helped us with the screen for the posters, rush everything. So that
Right.
That basically killed all of our profit margins on the shirts.
Yeah.
And also we had, there are just all sorts of little dumb things that I didn't mention, but like,
Of course.
we let's say, I don't remember the numbers, but let's say we sold 100 shirts. Well, we didn't account for the fact that the printing process isn't perfect all the time. And so you
Right.
need to, like, if you're going to print 100 shirts, you really need to print like 120, and you'll have some that get ruined or whatever, or the thread's not right or something. So we had done that, but then our friend who was trying to print them for us like screwed up like a dozen shirts trying to like figure out his printing process, and we're like, oh shit, like, well, we need to buy more shirts now, and then we need to pay this guy, and he's got to rush it and all of these things.
There's no there's really no other way to learn half of this than, yes, get as much knowledge as you can to try to avoid mistakes, but until you do it, like, so many things, so many obstacles that you can't even comprehend exist
Yeah,
will happen, and the only really way is to be like, oh crap, okay, now, because later on you're able to like totally talk about every technicality, and people think, oh, I have to know everything they know to start. It's like,
Yeah.
no, I only know how long the drive takes, how long it takes for the postage, what the stamp costs, what this state versus this, because we've like lost money in every different, what the cut costs, because we've screwed up and learned from it each time. Now, like, along the way, you become a pro. But people think like, I need to know all that before I start. And it's like, no, if you have something good and there's demand, like, go for it and get it out there.
Yeah. So we had that leftover, not a lot of that money left, but we largely, I don't think that we really even paid ourselves. I
I'm
vaguely
sure.
remember that we mostly reinvested that into the business because we ordered coffee mugs next. And
Were you having more orders coming in pretty quickly?
Yeah. So we basically, I don't remember how quickly initially, but I mean, it was just like rolling orders. So we had those initial ones, and then we took the, because we had them in inventory, we had them, we took the discount off, and it was just like, this is what we're selling. We've got the same poster in 3 different colors, and then 2 or 3 different pieces of apparel, t-shirts, and basically Jason and I, a few times a week, like 9 o'clock at night, we used to joke that GFDA was the party that ran from 9 o'clock until ? Because it was like, well, how many orders do we have? I don't know. And so we slowly like developed a system, just happenstance of, I would take the orders, and initially, again, we're just so dumb.
Well, you're not really. I mean, dumb's you are, but you have to be dumb to get, like, you have to go through being stupid to become phenomenal. Dumb's one of the steps along. People, like in school, I told you before, I thought you were either smart or stupid, but I learned that there's no smart. You become a genius by going through dumb like a million times.
Right. It's that experience. And so one of the things that we did initially, we had like just regular 8.5 by 11 paper, and we would print off like blank address labels. So it just it was like from, to, and then lines. And so then basically we used PayPal, and Big Cartel was like the storefront service we were using at the time. And so the orders would come in, and then I would just we had a dedicated email address, and look at the PayPal order, and then there was the address, and then I would handwrite the address onto these like slips of paper.
Yeah.
And Jason would roll the poster, and he would, like, when he was done rolling the poster and he would put it in the tube, he would bring it in. So I had this like stack, and we would like match up, like, okay, black poster to this person, got it. And then I would put that on, and I would tape the label on and tape the tube closed. And we kind of like had this method going. It was like, I don't know how many months it took before it was like, well, why don't I just do like copy the address out of the email and paste it into like a PDF, like with like a live thing where you can fill in the text.
That's how a system
it was
gets
like
created.
And then you could do 4 at a time. So it was just like copy paste, and he would bring it in and tape it on. I didn't have to write it out.
Right.
And then with international orders, it was a huge pain for a long time, because so that process worked really well for domestic, but we actually had initially more international orders, maybe by a like 60-40 ratio than we did domestic. And so all of those required paperwork. And I don't mean like write the address out. I mean, it's like fill out this customs form and write it. And then
people don't have to comprehend how much time is spent on the like mundane admin.
Yes.
Because there's like, if you do, actually, the New York Times bestselling author who wrote the foreword of my book, Dan Miller, like, I love him to death.
Yeah.
And he has a quote. He says, if you do what you love, you'll never have to work A Day in Your Life, and I love him to death, but I'm like, I get what he's saying there, but I don't agree with it because you have to work. If you do what you love, you actually have to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. And a
Yeah.
lot of times you're going to hate it,
Yeah.
but because you ultimately love it, it makes it worth it. But you don't love every time you're, oh, awesome, we got this order from Japan and we got to fill out
Yeah.
20 pages and I'm sitting here for the next 10 hours doing the admin, the custom, but it's like,
Right.
but you're passionate about your overall company,
Right. Right.
but you're not like, yes, we get it. It's like, this sucks.
Yes. I love
People don't
writing
see that
addresses.
part.
It's,
'Cause I'm like, a real reality show following an entrepreneur would not just be like in this studio or like private jets. It like,
yeah.
they'd be like, all right, after the show wraps, 9 hours of like going there and just dead silence, filling out paperwork, like no talk, no, like you see that 1 minute of the spotlight for like every 1,000 hours of just like,
Yeah. It would
that
be,
would be a real reality.
it'd be one of those
show.
scenes where there's somebody like hunched over a desk writing and it just like fades in, fades out, fades in,
Yeah.
fades out, and implies like,
Like
a
a
long
month
period of
later.
time has
Yeah.
has passed, and their beard grows and they look like shit and they smell
Yeah.
bad. Like, yeah,
Yes.
that's exactly it.
That would be a real reality show. Yeah.
Yeah. Wouldn't be very interesting at all.
No, but people misconstrue with like the only flashes that they're showing, and they think that that's what it all is
Yeah.
like those moments, but they don't see that other part of
Yeah.
like that behind the scenes crap and getting it out there and going through the messes. Well, then, okay, so then you guys get to a point where now your house is
Mhm.
becoming, which was cool. And would you guys nickname the house again, real quick, and just explain where that came from? I know you talk about it in the book. But.
Yeah. So then what happens next is at the time when GFDA starts, the way that we're going about everything, we're actually running GFDA out of the grad studio at the university, which you can't really run a business out of the graduate studio. That eventually,
Frowned upon.
Yeah, the university is going to want their cut for the storage space and everything else. So my partner, my business partner Jason, and I, and then two other graduate students, interestingly, also both who happened to be named Jason. We were all sort of in need of a place to live for different reasons. I was living with a friend of mine who had recently gotten engaged, and his fiance had moved in, and it was just kind of it was just like an awkward situation. It was like, okay, I gotta get out. And then the other guys, like one lived really far away, another one had started graduate school but didn't have an opportunity to like find housing, so the university put him in the dorms, but because of whatever number of circumstances, like he was 30 years old and then in a dorm with all of the freshmen, and so that was just like maddening to him. And my other friend was living in a studio apartment, but it was like comparatively really expensive because you're living alone and everything
Right.
else. So we all kind of came together and said like, well, why don't we find a place and rent it? And we came. It was because it was between the fall and spring semester that we were looking. It's like not the usual time that you find housing. I mean, not that it's
In a college, like college-ish town,
Right,
where
right.
everything's pretty much rented out around the camp. Yeah.
right. And most places are like August leases, or if you've
Right.
got like August to June sort of thing. So
So it's not the cream of the crop pickings out there.
no. So we found this house through like I can't remember if it was classified or Craigslist or whatever. And the landlord lived in California, and so he had somebody locally that, like, I hesitate to use the word maintained, but he had keys for the property. So
Yeah.
so we went over. I remember, like, we went over the first day, and like the guy wasn't there yet, but we didn't know that, so we just like we drove up the driveway, and then the most convenient entrance was the back door, and the back door was open, so we just let ourselves in. Excuse me. And so the whole house was just like not in good condition.
Yes, I was seeing some of we were
fairly-
looking at some of the before
Yeah,
and after pictures.
It was fairly disheveled. The previous
there was
tenants,
blood on the floor that you found out later on.
Yeah. The previous tenants had been evicted. And so anyway, so we're walking around the house, and like everything's got this old, like probably 60s wood paneling. It feels like an abandoned hunting cabin where,
Right.
some sort of horror story took place and somebody was murdered.
Which possibly did,
Right,
did
right.
happen.
Yeah. There were like stains on the floor in the living room.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh, that looks like blood. And later we found out, yeah, it was from some fight that had broken out at a college party years prior.
It's funny because I saw that picture before, and it's almost like, what else would leave a stain like that?
Right,
Like,
right. Yeah, yeah.
it has is oil, maybe, I don't know. That would be my guess, because like coffee would fade more, and it was blood.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, we're talking to the landlord via phone, and then this other guy shows up and he's like, the first thing that he says to us is, if you're planning on selling drugs out of the property, I got a professor that watches the house for me, and so don't think you're going to do that. And we were like, oh,
learn through experience.
yeah, like no,
he's had it happen.
Yeah, we're genuinely like normal college students, graduate students, in fact, that are looking for housing. And so basically we talked about it, and then we talked with him, and we said, we'll fix your house up in exchange for cheaper rent, which he agreed to, which I, in retrospect, I really don't know how that happened. I mean, because he didn't know us from anyone else. And obviously he had a bad experience with previous tenants that had to be evicted. And, somehow we managed to convince him that we were, capable of doing that.
Yeah.
And so this was happening concurrently with like all of that printing stuff. So this was like November, where we were looking for housing and stuff.
What another reason why I love this is, all of this is like in school, they should have a course on books like yours, like in every, because I always like, they should teach classes. It should be meant on literally on perseverance should be the name of that everyone in life has to take, because it's like, you're always going to hit different times in life where it's like, there's nothing else that can get you through certain things but perseverance. And it's like, we're broke. We have to have a roof over our head. We don't have money. We're starting a company. We've got to buy this piece of crap house and figure out how to like fix it up with a limited time that we don't even have. And then get ready to go to grad school full time with money that we don't have while we're fixing up, and like kickstarting this business at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was,
so stop like, making excuses.
It's I think back
like,
on it.
You didn't get some great, like, I hate it when people like, but I don't have the crowdsource funding, or I'm like, the what? Most people don't get, here's $20 million, start your business. Like,
right. Like on TV.
Right. It doesn't usually happen.
But for the
I've
rest
never
of us,
met anyone where honestly it's happened.
Yeah. So we settled, like we were able to convince the landlord of that. And so in December, basically, like once the semester was over, so, as you're talking like first week of December, basically we moved all of our respective junk into the basement, and we just had like these piles of like, here's Jason's stuff, here's Brian's stuff, here's other Jason stuff, and here's other Jason stuff.
Right.
And then it was like, okay, well, we're going to do all this work in the house. I mean, we literally touched every surface: ceilings, floors, walls, cabinets, bathrooms, everything, new trim, all of this stuff. And it was like, we sort of intrinsically understood, like, the semester's going to start in the middle of January, whatever the date was. And like, whatever we don't get done, probably once we're back in school and running this business, is like, it's not going to get done. There's just too much to do. We're teaching classes, we're taking classes.
Like, you're literally not going to have a spare second.
So like, we need to do as much as possible, like yesterday.
Yeah.
Was the feeling. And so we, with the exception of Christmas, basically just Christmas, we would wake up in the morning, put our dirty clothes back on, and then get to work.
Yeah.
And then, we'd break for lunch, we'd break for dinner, we'd start drinking at night. And then at whatever point we just were like, okay, I just got to pass out. You would take your gross clothes off, and then like, we have like a mattress on the floor, and you just sleep there. And then you'd wake up the next morning and be like, okay,
time to start up,
back at it. And so, we did that for like 5 weeks. And I remember even New Year's, like we were working on New Year's, and we were like painting the living room, and it was like, we don't have, well, I'll go back to this in a second, but we were painting in the living room, and it was like, we're painting, and then somebody looked at their watch or their phone and was like,
Happy New Year.
Oh yeah, it's like 12:05. Everyone's like, Happy New Year.
Back to work.
But even
But it's what it takes, man.
yeah, and even in the first like 2 weeks,
Yeah.
like we didn't have we so the previous tenants had been evicted, I said, and the in order to get a bunch of the utilities hooked up, gas, electric, etc., we had to prove that we weren't those tenants because they owed hundreds of dollars.
Oh, wow.
So
So they wouldn't even. So did they make you do like a deposit or? I've had that.
we didn't have to do a deposit. We just had to provide like paperwork and show that we weren't them, and then they can chase after those people.
they're blacklisted.
But so we had to we had to get a bunch of these things turned back on because it had been shut off.
Yeah.
And so like for the first like week and a half, like we didn't have any heat. Keeping in mind this is December in Northeast Ohio, but we had electric. And so we had like little electrical space heaters that we would plug in, and we would move with us throughout the house. And we had like one lamp so that as it got dark, we had to like be in the same general area. And I guess
we're to everyone listening, if you haven't been to that part of Ohio, we're talking Fahrenheit. Someone I was just in Paris and they were like telling me stuff in Celsius. I'm like, please dumb it down for me. I don't know how that works. Fahrenheit usually in the like 30s was nice, lucky. 40s is really lucky. Easily can get in the teens.
Oh,
at
yeah.
night, single digits.
Yeah.
Plus something with that humidity. I don't know. That's my own theory, because something about the Colorado winters, there's some more of like a bone chilling coldness and like that northern Ohio. And I say my own theory is the humidity. I don't know what it is, but without just those little space heaters, man, you can see your breath.
Yeah.
Just to give them a visual if they haven't been there.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, for that first week, we would sleep in the grad studio because there wasn't like heat for the house, and then once we had the gas turned on shortly thereafter, then we would stay in the house. But yeah, so we just we really worked at that for those 5 weeks and got the vast majority of things that we wanted to do done. And then there were a couple other sort of like smaller side projects that we did, that semester and into the future. But that was like a huge push to like transform this house in no time flat.
Yeah. Well, then you guys move in. Well, you're living there already, but now you're starting your company.
Now we're living there.
Like living there. And then you start to transition. You're not officially probably registered as a company yet. I don't know. But then you at some point start getting enough like sales and everything where I'm even like bringing them forward in time, because the book goes through it all. But what I love is like for each chapter, what's one of your favorite visuals in here?
Oh boy, I don't know.
I've sticky taped a lot, but I'm just curious. Do you have? There's so many. I'm flipping through it right now, everyone. If you're
maybe let's see towards the back there. Well, let's see. There's the measure twice one, which we were talking about earlier. Which actually is a poster that we sell wherever that.
Yes,
there we go.
we
have a variation of this.
Read it. It's everyone that's just listening that can't see.
So it says measure twice, cut fucking once.
Hold on 1 second.
I love that it's disconnected from actually saying it. All right. So your granddad made it look deceptively easy to build sweet bookshelves. Creating something that can stand the test of time requires accountability for your actions, not activity on your social media accounts. Tapping squares on a phone doesn't demand much presence of mind, and the results don't add up to much over the years. With the bandsaw, you've made a lasting change when your thumb flies across the room.
Let me show now.
Go for it.
I'm going to describe it. This is why you have to get the book, because you see that, but I hate looking in the camera. Then like on the page, the second page is purposely like off.
Yeah, it's
my hand moves the wrong, like off center, where it says measure twice, cut fucking once, and it has like visually next to it purposely off. Which is like the whole creativity of why this book is so awesome. That's what I wanted to point out. Like it has the full stories like you're sharing of like you guys' journey through this like entrepreneurial adventure, but then throughout it, which is why you have to physically have it. It has, like you said, this is a poster. And I remember looking through like, oh, dude, I want to hang this up.
Mm.
Then I found out you could, and I ordered some. But like that's so cool. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, so yeah, the book itself. I mean, it's a couple chapters, and each chapter opens with a narrative about the first few years of our business, and it's themed loosely around the creative process. So, chapter one's like getting started. Chapter two is dealing with
I
obstacles,
love this one
and
too.
then after
Sorry.
the narrative component, there's anywhere from like maybe 10, 12 pieces of advice that are each a full spread, and there's some sort of there's copy about the advice and then a visual concept that is makes it interesting. And so that's the general approach for the book.
Right. And the book came late, and that's where we're gonna share with everyone too, of like you got to a point where your partner was deciding, all right, I'm gonna go do my own thing now. And that was also at the time where you were deciding, okay, which I love it all because it's usually like when people ask me, like, is this the thing I should do? It, like compared to this, I'm like, whichever one like scares the hell out of you more,
Hmm.
usually, like I hate to say it, that's usually the one you're supposed to do. And but this is going on, and oh, and to add to that, when the circumstances are usually like as
Hmm.
bad as they can be to
Right.
do that,
Yeah.
is when's the timing? Usually
The
then.
worst time possible.
Yeah, like, and people listening, this is all about giving everyone like real hope. This show's motivational, but it's not like it's real stories behind the story.
Hmm.
And right now, you turn on any I hate the news and stuff, but you listen to anything, I've never seen like a recession pre-talked about more than like we're already in one, but like people are thinking a lot of people are probably paralyzed. I know they are, that I've
Yeah.
talked to, that are paralyzed thinking the circumstances don't match up with the time,
Hmm.
that it doesn't matter. It's usually they don't when
Yeah.
you're supposed to be doing the thing that you should do. So going back to that, your partner that you've run this company with is like going through, and you said, in good terms, choosing another season of his life,
Yeah.
but you still decided that I'm going to go through and do this book.
Yeah, this was many years later. We're kind of jumping ahead, but he and I had thought like at some point that we would do a book, and actually through maybe like 3-4 years in, we had been contacted by three different publishing companies, all within like 6 months of each other, and they were like, "Oh, it'd be great for you to do a book," and we kind of had the same experience each time. It was kind of it was funny, but not. And so they would reach out to us and say like, "Hey, we'd love for you to do a book," and we'd say, "Great. What do you interested in us doing?" Because we like sort of had some of our own thoughts, but because they specifically had reached out to us, and it
Mm.
wasn't like, I mean, they weren't the biggest publishers ever, but they weren't like mom and pop shops either.
Right.
They were publishers that
And
you would
you ended
recognize.
up getting one of the like top 3,
Yeah, yeah.
but not yet though. You
But
were getting,
yeah,
so when you started were you seeing it like this, and like to have the visuals at all
not
yet?
not not at this point. So
Mm.
for each of those three publishers, this is again like sort of 3-4 years in, we put then they were like, well, just write us a proposal, and we say like, okay, what do you want? And they say, well, you put the proposal together, like, okay, like,
$500 million.
right, like
You don't know what to, yeah.
yeah, like I mean, we didn't know how to make a proposal, so we took our best shot at it, and then we would
Right.
literally each time this happened, they reached
Did
out
you
to us.
Google? Like, that's
Oh,
harder
for sure.
to Google, it's easier to see, like, okay, what does the average T-shirt sell for?
Yeah.
It's harder
How do
because
you write
with
a book
speaking and
proposal?
stuff too, like, what should my fee be when I have 16 years of business experience?
Yeah.
It's like, you have to figure something out, but it's like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
tricky. Your mind will play tricks on you too when you're
Oh,
like going
totally.
higher. It'll
Yeah.
be like, they're gonna, then you learn like, wait, what? You can, but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So, each time we like, hey, we'd like you to do a book with us. Like, okay, well, what do you want? And they're like, well, we don't know. You write us a proposal, and so we write the proposal and we'd submit it to them, and they'd say, no, actually, we had something in mind more like this, and we're like, what why didn't you just tell us that in the first place?
Right.
And so then we would
They're like,
modify
we
the
just wanna see
proposal.
what you don't know. Yeah.
Right. And then we would give it back to them and they'd say like, great, thanks. And then they would take it to their, board of directors or whoever makes the decisions. And they come back and say like, actually, we don't want to do this. And then that was it. And literally
Publishers are usually really fast.
like 1, 2, yeah. Like, so like one right after another. And we're like, okay, well, we've got this loose proposal, but these 3 don't want it. And we had all these other projects going on. So it sort of got tabled. And then through a connection that my business partner had, and he had moved to New York City at this point, we ended up getting a book agent, which was very helpful.
Oh, wow.
And then she was helping us with our proposal. And admittedly, I think partly because we were kind of like, we had all these other projects going on, and we would do a proposal, we would send it to her, and she would provide feedback, and we say, hey, great, we'll get this to you like ASAP, like next week. And then 3 months would go by and we're like, hey, here's the updated proposal again. And then, we kind of like went through that same, it was very slow process on our end.
Right.
Not because we were definitely lazy about it. I don't want to say that, but like we just had other things that were, more of a priority at the time.
Got it.
And so then in, I want to say it was 2017, my business partner decided that, at that time I was living, I'd moved around a bit and I was back in Pittsburgh, which is where I grew up. And he was in New York City, and it was just like the business wasn't going fantastic, and he had some other opportunities. And so, we had kind of gotten into a habit from very early on, like the first summer, of like having these conversations about like, hey, do you want to do this again for another year? We kind of have like a summer-ish check-in.
Yeah.
And so, not that we necessarily had planned to have like the summer check-in, but like it was sometime in the summer, and we were talking on the phone, and he was just like, I don't know that I want to keep doing this anymore. I've got some other.
And this is how many years in?
7.
7 years. So pushing towards a decade.
Yeah.
Which a lot of businesses, statistically fail within the first year. To make it to 3 to 5 years, the odds are so stacked.
Yeah.
To make it beyond 5, that's like a huge hurdle making it. I remember once we hit a decade, I was like, whoa. But it's not like it gets easier, but you were pushing a decade. So that's 7 years is a lot of time together. People, just like the emotional, it's like a marriage in a way. Like
Right.
your partner, you go through good, bad, fighting,
Yep.
winning, losing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, I'm just like pointing out to people, it's hard finding it, like, and emotionally too. It's kind of like, oh man, because to be honest, like you think, man, can I do it? Just me? Am I gonna? But then on top of that, you're also like losing someone that's like been in battle with you
Right.
for these years. And of course, magically, that's why I was saying with the whole circumstances are against you around that time. Of what better time could it be to? Is that when they reach out, like this publishing company, like we?
No. So, he decided he was going to leave, and our agreement was basically like the business was in debt. So I just decided, like I will take all of that on, and then he can leave clean. And that's like our, agreement, without getting into all the technical details, of course. But
it's cool to hear. Yeah, of course. But like the risk, because you're basically doubling down on your buyout is. It's not like you had all this excess. Oh, we have $20 million in our company. Because people think of it like that. Like you buy your partner out. They don't understand there's so many levels.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, the buyout was we were in debt and I will take on all this debt. By the way, I've been there before with my company. It's like we were able to do a smaller buyout. Plus I remember my accountant was like, dude, you should not have. You're like, you should be scared. And I'm like, well, I've already signed it. It's done. Like, F you. Like, can you give me better? Is that okay? And anyway, I'm already like in the like, I can't, there's no plan B. Like, I am scared. You don't need to tell me that.
Yeah. All in.
So you take on all the debt and now it's just you.
Right. And I mean, it was
that was like the buyout, like, but then now he's not responsible for the debt. So now it's all on you. And people, think that it's like only attached to the business, but you have to personally put your name on so
Right,
much.
right. Yeah.
Try getting a mortgage when you're starting out a company and
Mm,
have them say, "Oh, that's all your business. That won't relate to you."
yeah, no, that's not the case at all.
It
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
happen,
So
right?
I was liable personally for that,
Yeah,
the way that our loan was with the SBA and all that stuff.
been there.
So
You're still there.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
so he left and then I took over, and my feeling at the time was like this might have been the dumbest mistake that I've ever made. Like,
Yeah.
all of my school was paid off. Like, I didn't have any, maybe a
Oh,
little bit of
wow.
credit card debt. Like I was good in the sense of like I'm not, anywhere else in my life like deeply in debt. My car was
Right.
at the time my car was paid off, like all those things.
That's
It was
actually a
like
good spot to be. Yeah.
so it was like, okay, well, I'm just going to shoulder this load. But my thinking was like, okay, well, if this was the dumbest decision that I've ever made, at the very least, I need to put a super serious effort into finalizing this book proposal and making a real shot at getting a
Mm,
book published. Because at the very least, then I can, if I can pull that off, I wasn't really thinking about it like, oh, I'll get money from this.
mm,
I
mm,
was
mm.
really thinking about it from the standpoint of like this will be the close of a chapter of my life, and there will be like there'll be like this physical artifact will have some
Right.
sort of representation of this crazy story, this wonderful experience, this painful experience
Right.
that I've had, and that he and I and a number of other people had been through.
To be able to have a full book, isn't it weird, Brian, how like when you have one and then you get around more people, it becomes like this weird new normal, but it's such a huge benchmark
Mm,
to not I'm like anyone can start a book, but to finish it and have it actually out and like that's a huge freaking accomplishment. That's not it's just not to even have a story to share to put
mhm.
into a book and to have it out there. Like man, it's
Yeah.
a lot more than people know. So I get that part of like you're not even thinking just business. You're like this is just another part of like this like legacy of this
Mm,
adventure.
mhm.
Yeah.
So, so I got super serious about it. And unlike before, where I would do a revision and send it to the book agent, months later, it was like that 2017, 2018, like December, January, it was like every few days, we went through like 12 revisions in the course of 6 weeks. It was like, okay, fixed. Okay, change this. Okay, here's this. Here's new sample pages. Here's this. And my goal was like get this done, and
Who-
so we could get it out.
You had so who so you had someone. So you were locked in at this time?
So well, that I had a book agent, so there's like
Okay, so you sent it to
an
the agent. I
agency like
misunderstood for a second.
represents you, and then you have your publisher. Then they
So
try
you
to sell it
still
to
don't have a
publishers.
publisher yet.
Correct, correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
just
just refining the proposal for the agent to send off to publishers.
got it.
So
Did you at this point have this envision yet, like the way it is now? Were you starting to
it
kind of see it like that?
yeah, it was loosely set up this way. The narrative component was not nearly as extensive. We were looking more like the narrative component was going to be, you know, one or two spreads, like, 2 or 4
Oh,
pages. And then, we had this idea of the sort of the visual conceptual approach to the advice throughout the whole book.
right.
But
So it's kind of like um it's kind of cool hearing you really share the story behind the story from having read the book before
mhm,
I even personally met you. It's kind of cool cuz really that's how your web page started was like these visual components that were helpful in teaching people.
mhm,
Then your book became this whole other adaptation of that, but you still wanted the visual components, but then it's helping people at another level when you add in like your real story, like chapter stories.
yeah,
I personally have never seen anything. I'm telling you, I would not be sitting here with you and like BSing you, and I wouldn't have started pre-share. I was like texting the guy who set my whole studio up and works with Eric Thomas. His book's up there in the
mhm,
middle. I was he does all the visuals, video editing. I started sending him
mhm.
taking pictures, and he doesn't actually ET doesn't ever cuss. Um, greatest dude. He yells a lot, but he's awesome. But Carl, I'm like, dude, you guys gotta. Who can? This is so like effing off. Like, and they were like, oh my god, that's badass. Like, he's like, I don't even swear, and like that is like he want to say effing awesome, but it is like, and he's really visual. Like
Mhm.
he edits, he explains the way he does the editing and stuff. Of he sees lives, he sees everything through stories.
Mhm.
Like that's the way his brain is. So when he was like, I'm like, I'm telling you, dude, I've never seen. He's like, what is that? I'm buying that right now because I have not seen it. It's just so cool
Mm.
that it almost never like this never that so many times this book that you're all looking at right now that we're talking about almost never happened.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
there's could have been a billion excuses to give up, and that's
Yeah.
like why I always tell everyone, like when right now you're going through and you think it's just you, like that's why we have these stories is to remember, like, dude, Brian, you were going on 8 years, 7 years of your company. Your partner is choosing another adventure,
Mhm.
and you still don't have a publisher yet. And now you're deciding, but we're going to keep doubling down. So anyway, it's not done yet, but you're kind of starting to see some of the concepts and send them to
Yeah.
your agent.
Yeah. And so, with it's funny when I look back at the proposal that the first, because we're working on a proposal for the second book now and have been like for a bit. It's really interesting to look at back to the first one and see how raw it is, particularly compared to what the finished product of the book is. But like, like the seed of the idea for what this turned into was definitely there. You can see it, like that general format of like, okay, we're going to follow the creative process through, however many chapters. And then, we're going to open with a short narrative, which ended up being a lot more extensive in the final product. And then these like clever advice spreads. But, it was definitely a different animal
Right,
initially.
right.
So yeah, so I finished the proposal after a bunch of revisions, and then she sent it off, and I had conversations with like half a dozen to a dozen publishers somewhere in there. And the way that works is usually you have like a phone call, and you're kind of like checking each other out. They're trying to see if you're full of shit and going to be a good fit, and vice versa, because
Right.
they're talking a little bit about like how they would market the book and what flexibility they would have and things like that. And
They don't ever over promised and under
oh no,
deliver, do
never,
they?
not once.
I've never heard of that in
No.
my life. So
Yeah,
and by the way, no disrespect to the publishing company who did this, because this book came
Yeah,
out
they did
beautifully, and I love that
they did a great job.
they obviously let you have your say in it. Because I've seen
Yeah, that
some butcher
that was
things up.
part of what we were, with any of the publishers that we were initially considering, as we were having these dialogue, it was like, no, we're going to design it. Like that's our background. Like this isn't like we'll write this and then you hire somebody, that's on your staff that,
Like
has an associate's degree to design it. Like we're
right.
soup to nuts. We want
Which
like
usually a
full
lot of
control.
writers that are super technical writing totally need, because they have
Right.
the writing aspect, but not the creative brain like yours with a design on. But that's what you guys did.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you're designers.
So we were super insistent on that, and so we talked to a bunch of publishers, and one of them was HarperCollins, and my honest feeling was like, I remember getting off the phone with the editor from there, thinking like, compared to everybody else that we talked to, she seemed the most disinterested and the most like suspicious about like our company and like what like all of these different details. And so many people were like the other publishing agencies were just like bubbly and excited and like, oh, I love this. And she was way more the editor was way more like, well, okay, so tell me about this again, and like, where is this from, and what did you do, and like each of these little detailed pieces of information. And so I mean, admittedly, when I got off the phone with her, I was like, well, they're just not interested.
They're not.
Like, thankfully there's these other ones we've talked to. I feel fairly confident that someone's going to do this book, but it's definitely not going to be with them.
That's a good learning? So I'm cutting you up, Brian, because
Sure,
this is a good thing for everyone. When people are over, I talk about this even in hiring. I've learned the wrong way. You want them to be passionate about what your company does.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've learned is when people are way too overly wishy-washy passionate, I've learned that to be a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
To where I used to take it as, oh man, they're so now, which of course we want them to be passionate about what we do.
Sure. Yeah.
But I've seen I've had happen too many times,
Mhm.
even going to hiring, where they flipped on that to the moment it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
everything overly and got hard, because work gets hard.
Yeah.
They were like, screw this. I learned to be like cautious of.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, with a publisher that was more interested, but felt it's good when they have some passion, like you want them to like what
Yeah.
they do, but was asking the tougher questions, because a lot of the ones that were so eagerly passionate might have been, but none of them came through with it either.
Well, yeah. So
She's seen so many, she's just like,
yeah. So what ended up happening, which I didn't even know was like a possibility. So, learning all of this as we go, of course. But like after you talk to all these people, then you go to, and I may screw up the terminology, but it'll be understandable for the rest of us lay people that are not in the publishing industry.
Right.
But like you go to something that I think is called an auction, and so basically there's a period of time. I think usually it's a day or two, or maybe it's a week, where all of the different publishers that you talk to, like the agent goes to them and says, "Hey, we're going to auction, quote unquote, and by this date at this time, if you were going to make an offer on the book, then that needs to be submitted, and then the authors will review the offers and then decide what direction to go." And so that gives them all a bit of a competition to like offer you a good rate, and they kind of like, then they're coming back and selling you like, oh, this is what we'll pay you, this is what your royalties will be, this is how we see distribution, and blah blah blah, and then you can kind of make your decision based on some of those.
And at that time, like, you don't really know what royalty and all that.
No. I mean,
I'm just letting everyone know, so you don't feel like, oh my, I can't do that. I didn't know till I was like, oh, dude, I had a book signing at Barnes and Noble. We sold 400 copies. I was doing the math. I'm like, this check, and they're like, no. The publisher's like, no, you still owe us for the buyback. I'm like, wait, the what? And with those, it's 30% off 40. I'm like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah. Oh, you get nothing. Great. But what ended up happening for us was like right the day before we were going to go to auction, the HarperCollins, like the editor there, reached out directly to the agent and said, there is a specific term for this, but it's very unusual. She reached out to our agent and said, we will pay you this to not go to auction. So it wasn't even like, there wasn't like the formal offer letter and everything. It was basically like, we'll pay you this if you go with us and don't go to auction, and just like skip that. And typically, like, although that is rare, it does happen. So usually
and that was her.
The
one that seemed like
not
reluctant.
so interested. Yeah. So basically I said to the agent, I was like, oh, wow. So is this normal? And she's like, not really. But she's like, this is better than what I was expecting that we would get. And, at the time, like, my agent was really good about like explaining things, and, ultimately like the decision was in our hands,
right,
to say like yes or no. And so I went back to her. I said, like, because we don't know anything. I said, well, do you think that there's any harm in asking for like 10% more? Like, it was a good offer, but to me, it sort of felt like,
it's your life's work.
Well, yeah. We're in a business negotiation. Clearly you see some value in this, like, and you're a huge publishing company. Like, I can ask and they can say no.
You're not asking for 500% more.
No,
it's not 10%. It's a good ask.
And so that was what I did. She's like, yeah, we can do that. Totally. I was like, okay. So we did that and said, like, if you give us 10% more, then a definite yes. And then they came back and said, okay. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that actually worked.
It's not easy too. And to get like a real major publisher at that point. Should be, if it's working correctly. Yeah. I don't know what's going on with this live stream stuff. Anyway, we're recording. So I'm showing a screen right now in the background, Brian. So for everyone listening, we're showing your guys' IG page from GFDA. So go to, it's at GFDA on Instagram, right?
At gfda.co.
.co. Okay. And that's where, well, it's showing your book. It's showing some of the prints. And this is something else that's cool. Well, before we got to something I want to talk about, which I thought was awesome, how Samuel L. Jackson talked about some of your guys' work, which is really cool. I also love how you guys have built up. Well, I don't know if it's you guys or you or how many are on the team when you started going to the social media like Instagram space
Hmm.
versus just the web page, to where you have almost 500,000 like very loyal followers and stuff, and tons of engagement and everything too, from what I see. And I love the different posts, and I like them how it's awesome. It's your brand, but then you can order like the prints and stuff from it. But people don't look at it as like, oh, this is just some sales page. Like they
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah. We started, with once the book was done, but before it had been like published officially, we decided that we were going to try to increase our social media engagement, like all the things that you would theoretically want to do to like market your book within what we have available to us. And because of the profanity that's associated with our brand, we largely can't use any sort of, digital advertising like Facebook ads or whatever, because everything that we produce has profanity in it. Not everything, but most everything.
Some of it's like you can see in the back, do the effing work. It has like the asterisk with a U.
Right. But even then, even when we censor the profanity, it's still like the guidelines for Facebook, for instance. You can't replace characters with other characters where you can still tell that there's profanity. It has to be like completely censored or blocked out, or of course non-existent. Otherwise, it falls under the category of hate speech, unfortunately.
But you can have like naked. Come on, Zuckerberg. Well, plus they have a thing where you have to turn on your settings to be able to see like adult type
Right.
content.
Right,
So
right.
like
And
that's kind of ridiculous.
I
to
mean,
me.
even we've got whatever 60 or 70,000 subscribers, followers, likes on Facebook on our Facebook page. Like, I'd be happy just to be able to communicate with those people via ads, but nonetheless, it's not possible. So, anyways, jumping back to the
Yeah.
Instagram thing and trying to to build our audience. So I think that we had like somewhere in the low 20,000s before our book was published, and so we're maybe like 6-7 months out. And so I started. I figured out through talking to some people like, oh, we should be posting like the advice stuff all the time. And my colleague Jason, who was also the co-author on the book, he had largely been he wrote the book basically. The way that it started off, it was me and Jason, my former business partner. We were working on the book, and I was kind of doing the writing, and then I would share it with Jason Richburg, who became the writer. So, like for instance, I wrote the first chapter, and then I sent it to him. I'm like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And it was like, the worst red line, like college essay, like this is wrong, this is terrible, do this. It's like, what are you trying to say here, kind of thing. And ultimately, we kind of decided like, well, it would just be best if Jason wrote it, because he was just a way better writer than I was by far. And what was also helpful is most everything, even though he wasn't directly involved with GFDA, for the first few years, the way that he came to be, he was there. He lived in the house with us that we rented, and he helped when we were printing the posters. And so, he was sort of observing everything that was happening during all the time that the book was the book talks about. So he had wrote the advice, and he wrote the narrative, and then it was like this sort of natural progression that like he started writing the content for the social media. And so then we started publishing that like daily. I think we started with like Monday through Friday, and then eventually we got into like all 7 days of the week. And so he was writing extensively, like a paragraph every day. And then as we would after we got so many, then we would cycle the content, and then that would give him a little bit more breathing room to add more and to add more. And so we kind of like built up this compendium of all of the pieces of advice that he's written, which were like probably 250, 300 at this point, separate from what's in the first book, which is also why we're working on a follow-up.
Okay.
But we can talk about that more
But
later.
this is before the book is
right. So the book hasn't been published yet, and so rapidly, like through people responding to the writing that Jason was doing in the social media content, we went very quickly from like 20-some thousand to 80,000 by the time the book came out.
That's awesome.
And that was again like less than 6 months, and no
Jeez.
advertising, it was just
I'm looking
organic
right
growth.
now. Yeah, like so when you're watching this, you can see right behind us you're about at 489,000. So pretty much 490,000.
Yeah, yeah, and you know,
In 6 months, you guys were, that's, dude, that is not easy. That's a
yeah,
loyal.
a-
That's like,
and we
that's
just,
so cool.
you know, from there we just continued to rapidly increase followers up until about a year ago, and we've largely been stagnant, kind of like around this. You know, it fluctuates up and down, but the algorithms change. The focus is more on, you know, reels and stories, and you know, our content is largely static, you know, text. Which, I mean, everything about our content goes against what should work on Instagram. So it's a testament to the content and also a miracle at the same time, because
Right.
they, like, you know, if you look at you know, any of those things, like how do I increase my engagement on Instagram, they'll say like, don't use text, don't use static images, like all these things, like, and we do all of the wrong things, and yet
Right.
nonetheless it's like it's still highly successful.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it continued to increase exponentially for years, and then it's kind of, you know, we have the churn, like we're not necessarily adding lots of people, but you know, we've got, you know, people stop following and we get new people, and you know, bots get cleared out or whatever, and so we, you know, we're fairly close to that 500,000 mark.
So you guys now, since I just like jumped to that, gave them some visuals of it too, but going back to the book, so you got the publisher, you're starting, like they accepted the bid, or you guys accepted it, you negotiated an offer.
Yeah.
So then now you start getting to where, like, just how this all blends together. So you mentioned the content. So who was it again that was like starting to write your content on like Facebook, Instagram?
Right. So Jason Richburg, who works with me now and is a good friend and colleague, and you know, I've known
Okay.
him since our first year of graduate school together. He basically started doing the writing, and as I sort of just described, basically what happened was, you know, originally it was just Jason Bacher and myself. That was what the contract was for, and Jason and I were writing this and doing this like after he had left the company. Um, which was good, for us. I think, you know, we parted on very amicable terms, but the act of doing the book and kind of like reflecting on the last, like at that point, 7 or 8 years of being in business together, and all the ridiculous stories and things that had happened and so forth, I think was like also kind of a healing thing, that even though we had parted on good terms, I mean, it's still like, it's still difficult for a number of reasons for both
Yeah.
of us, like him moving on from something that he invested so much time in, and me kind of dealing with feeling alone and everything else. And so I think that really helped to like solidify like the relationship that he and I had outside of the business realm, and you know, allowed us to move forward without carrying a bunch of resentment and frustration and all those negative things that are highly likely to
Right.
happen when
With a
any
partnership dissolve.
yeah,
So,
anytime like a
so it was
relationship
almost
dissolves.
like, in a cool way, you guys were like going through, by doing the book together after he was like going on his own adventure and
Right.
leaving as a partner, you were like sharing, and revisiting all those memories, and most of them, because a lot of times you can just remember, man, it's been exhausting,
Yeah.
but you can remember, like, dude, you forget all the stuff that you actually accomplished
Oh yeah.
till you go through, like, God, like, how did we do that?
Yep. Yeah.
And then you laugh at stuff, and or you see like bonding moments or all
Yeah.
kinds of, so that is kind of cool how it was therapeutic. So was part of the agreement where did Jason like give the rights to you for the book fully, or as the business, or was it like, we're still going to merge on
We so
this book project?
we basically we had signed the book contract as individuals with nothing to do with the business.
Okay.
You
Okay,
know,
got it.
and it was, I mean, it was important for me, like, because of the nature of the book and everything, even though he had left the business, presuming that he wanted to be a part of it, which he did,
Right.
but it was like to have him involved, because it's like, this is our story
It's
regardless of
both
where
your
we're at
story.
now.
Yeah.
You know, it's just the right thing. It's the right thing for the story. It's the right thing to do for him and for our personal relationship and everything else. So anyways, when we started, and it was theoretically just he and I, and I knew that Jason Richburg, the other Jason, was a better writer, and we had been friends since graduate school, and you know, he was living, I think he was in South Carolina at that point. I can't remember. He's
Mm.
originally from South Carolina, kind of moved around and taught at different universities after we all left graduate school. Um, but in any case, so I was supposed to do primarily the writing, and then Jason Bacher and I were going to do the visuals back and forth because
Okay.
both of us have the design background. But I mean, anything with GFDA prior to like 2017, when there was a writing component that was necessary, that would just happen to be the role that I did. Like Jason handled finances and other things
Got
like
it.
that. But we both always did creative together.
Okay.
But the writing was happened to be more my thing at the time. But anyway, so I mentioned, I did some of the initial first chapter in advice, and then I sent it to Jason Richburg, and it was, like a bloodbath in red pen. So, after a little bit of time, it was like, all right, well, you were there for all of this, so why don't you write it? So Jason Bacher and I would kind of we would have like calls with him and talk with him about, what we felt the chapter should be about, and, kind of give some bullet points and everything. And then he would craft the narrative from there. And I mean, he did such a fantastic job.
Nails it. And so would he be like, when he's butchering it and stuff, was it like on the grammar, or was it like, no, you guys got to elaborate more and not use the same word, or,
It
or
wasn't-
explain it more? And
it-
like, what strength did he have that you guys were like the gap?
It
in
was
the
well, it
writing?
wasn't necessarily like grammar or spelling or anything like that. It was
Right.
like how to write a narrative, like how to write a story, how to like engage your audience, how to create a feeling for them, like all these things that I can relate to from a design perspective.
Right.
It's like
you encaptured in your pictures and your work with like the fewer words telling a
Right.
whole story,
right,
where he's like,
yeah,
you got to describe that with actual words.
yeah, and like if you read the book, like it's a really enjoyable read, and it's because that he has a mastery of the craft that
Got it.
we just don't have and haven't focused on. And he's, even though Jason Richburg, even though he also is a design background, like went to
Right.
graduate school with us, like he spent a lot of his 20s and 30s like reading classical literature and is like not formally trained in the sense that like, oh, he has an English degree or anything, but he just has a passion for language and the written word, and he just has a presence about him that's very like, he's good in conversation, he's witty, he's smart, and he was able to bring all of those qualities to the table. And the collaboration among all of us of like, we had a lot of fun, Jason and I, like the subtitles in the chapters, like trying to come up with these double entendres that communicated like what was happening, but also kind of like smarmy and funny at the same time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like the opening, like TLDR is just like, hey, if you just read the introduction, like this is what the book's about, is kind of playful, and
It's good. It's fun. It's all like on point with.
we try to not take ourselves too seriously. It's like, which I think comes through pretty clearly in the writing of like, we've got this
Yeah.
crazy story and everything, but
it is like serious with like the heart and what you went through, but it's also like put in a playful. It shows who you guys all like really are too.
Yeah.
It comes out. So yeah, he does nail it with the whole writing. And yeah, I'm just like sitting here reading through it all again right now. I love this, like this whatever it's called.
the paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Like,
a good,
what's type of paper is this? Like
it's a I don't remember the
you
specific
guys have to get the
brand,
book.
but it's like it's a coated stock. It's a little bit heavier weight, which helps with like how the ink works and all that stuff.
I love just you're talking about just in the introductory, like of the book, the last paragraph is, if the advice we've collected here could be distilled down into its simplest form, it would be: believe in yourself, work hard, enjoy your life, and never fucking, I need my little air horn. Bah, bah, bah. I always do it after. That's not in the book. Sorry. Never fucking give up. If that's all you take away from this book, we've done our job. I could not think of like a better mission statement for a book. And that's what this show is all about. That's why I was like, this is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It just, I went through an underline.
Yeah.
This was before even then. After I got to this, I'm like, all right, time to get these dudes on my show. Just started reaching out. And I wrote my neighbor who recommended this book to me. I'm like, I'm going to reach out to him and get him on. And he thought I was joking. I'm like, dude, I do that all the time with like most most of the guests that we pick, or they come from amazing referrals.
Hmm.
I'm like, we've got to talk more about this. But yeah, there's so much. And I'm jumping around here because of the book. I'm gonna have you get back into it with the publisher and how it's like now kind of getting into that final draft where it really comes together the way that it is.
Hmm.
But something here and the Samuel L. Jackson story.
Oh yeah,
Don't
yeah,
let
we
us
can,
forget to share
yeah,
that.
we can do that.
But I like this too, where so I got to hold it up. It says and it has a heart. I love cliches. The back is all black. If you're watching, when you watch it, you can see it. It looks amazing. But what you write here is so perfect. I'll get my foghorn ready. It'll be off like always. Don't succumb to fucking. You like that? It does nothing cliches. A strong concept is crafted, considered, scrutinized over. It doesn't materialize out of thin air, fully developed. If a light bulb suddenly appears over your head, the idea that spawned it probably isn't very original. Keep trying. That's like contradictory to the like generic advice that most people would give.
Yeah.
It like if a light bulb suddenly appears over your head, boom, idea. The idea that spawned it probably isn't very original. Keep trying. Like there's so much. It's simple, but that's so deep. Like what you're saying there, I would love for you just to break that down a little bit because there's something. It's not saying like that idea isn't a piece of the puzzle of where you need to go.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is that's not enough to get you to
Well, I think that
that like breakthrough level.
right, in the generic advice that everybody like talks about ad nauseum, it's like, oh, you have this great idea, but like what that doesn't account for, and what we're trying to communicate here is that, like, yeah, that's a piece, but as we've been having this conversation, talking about like all of the screw ups and changes in direction and all of these things that happen, like all of the fight to make the thing happen, is like that's all part of this experience. And so it's not like it's not like, oh well, you just sit there and have to think really hard and they have this brilliant idea and then like, oh, all the problems are solved. It's like no, it's not this. It is. I mean, there's certainly like an intellectual component to it, right? Like, I don't mean to oversimplify.
But you're saying like keep going because like what would be an example of someone doing that
well, like
the wrong way? Maybe like they get this light bulb quick thing and think that that's immediately the thing.
I think that
Do you think maybe they give up when that like.
Well, I think what happens is they get that idea and then, then something difficult happens in the process shortly thereafter. And it's like, oh, well, like, here's another thing. Here's like, oh, maybe I just need a different idea. And that a little bit like kind of comes out of the experience from teaching design at the university level where, some students would, like, every class, like they would come in and like, oh, I got this great idea. Like, let me share this idea with you. And, at the beginning of the semester, that's good. But then what would happen is like, then we would start getting into critiques and getting feedback. And it's like, well, this is what you need to improve on, or this is how it's not working. And then rather than continuing to develop and refine and chisel away and, the idea, then it would be like, they'd come back to the next class like, oh, I got this great idea, and be another idea. And it's like,
it's easier to have another idea than like the I think it was a CEO of Walmart was saying like you get like 1 point for thinking it and 9 points for actually executing it.
Right, because there's all sorts of other factors in the execution that you don't.
Yeah, the idea is the exciting part.
Right, and
so
then the rest of it
it's a lot easier
sucks.
to come. Yeah, like what we were talking about before, because it's easier to come up with another. Oh man, okay, so it's you. I'm trying to help people because you can think maybe this idea is the wrong one. And maybe it is, but a lot of times it's not. It's like you're on the right path, but you still just have a billion more miles on that path to go. And that's not the fun part. Another idea comes, the endorphins kick in, the adrenaline. It's like, But then you keep jumping around and nothing ever
Right.
gets done.
It's like an addiction to, like, the idea is the seed of possibility, and people become addicted to that feeling of like, oh well, there's all this possibility. It's all this
Yeah.
possibility, but you never turn the possibility into actuality, and so, um, it's like, the fruit from the tree rots. It's like, oh, this
Right.
brilliant idea, but then, like, you don't, the hard work and the effort and the blood, the sweat, the tears, whatever cliched language you want to
But
use.
the reason why it's cliche is because it's so true.
Yeah.
Like cliches are cliches usually for a reason. Like there's so much truth to
Hmm.
the blood. It is blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like that process of turning it into, from possibility into actuality, is
Yeah.
is kind of what we're getting at. And the thing with
Yeah.
the visual with cliches, it's like, you see this a lot in like visual language. And again, we're kind of leaning, like, more in the way that GFDA was early on, where our focus was design and creatives, whereas now we've moved more to inspiration and motivation, and a much wider and broader set of audiences. But when we're talking with the creatives, and you'd see this in student projects a lot too. It's like, oh well, I used a light bulb to showcase an idea. It's like, well, like, there's nothing memorable about that. Yeah, it's true. Or you use a heart, like the visual we're using there is a reference to the I Heart New York
Right.
that Milton
Right.
Glaser did. And that was, I mean, when he first did it, it was brilliant. Nobody had ever done anything like that.
Yeah.
But then, like, everybody does that, and it's like,
That's why you did the I Heart cliche. Got it.
right. So there's that reference to it, and then you see things like, it doesn't make sense. It's like, for me as a designer, it's like, oh, okay, well, it's like, I see you were trying there, but like, I've seen shirts that are like and then it's the shape of the state of Ohio, and then Ohio, and of course the reference is like I Heart Ohio, but it's like, it's kind of weird because, like, the shape of the state of Ohio isn't a heart, and it's like you're trying to, like, reference a cliche to, like, I Heart Ohio. It's like, sort of works, but
keep
not
trying. Yeah.
once you, like, take it beyond that first, like, initial, like, thinking, like, what the fuck does that really mean? Like, I don't know. It's kind of like, yeah, it's not really communicating what you think it is so much.
And something else you mentioned too is to be able to learn. There's two levels. First of all, learn how to take feedback
Hmm.
and kill your ego, which is not easy, but the only way to grow.
Yeah.
And then with having a company, then it's learning how to give feedback.
Hmm.
And because when you don't, you become passive aggressive, which doesn't, we can't read each other's minds
Yeah.
at the risk of
Well,
we're doing what's best to be productive, and helping people to take it the right way, like when they're
Mhm.
emotionally intelligent. I've seen some that aren't, like when they're super entitled.
Yeah.
Some people I've had that are so smart and used to always getting straight A's. When it comes to the real world and business, I've hired them
Yeah.
and they could not take, because they never didn't get an A when they had the whole
Mhm.
curriculum and stuff. But I'm like, dude, there's no curriculum for this. You're not getting an A because I don't even know how the hell we're gonna get there. But
Yeah.
this isn't, sorry, I love you. This literally isn't working.
Yeah.
So we've got to, they're like, no one's ever told me I was wrong. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
But not really. Like, you're not wrong or right.
It's just not
This
working.
isn't working. We've got to keep. And I had in the earlier, I've some people get it if they're willing to grow and they're coachable. We'll take them as far. I've had some push back, resist. Some have left. I've had people quit over like and then I've learned later, like, thank God.
Yeah.
'Cause that would have been a nightmare. Some I walked on eggshells with for way too long. I've learned not to do that anymore. It's like, I'm not saying that you have to be like a dictator, like you're stupid.
No.
But it's like, hey, I love you. This is awesome, but this isn't working.
Mhm.
Like we have to fund this like vision that we're on. Like, you need a paycheck, right? Like we all have to eat.
Yeah.
We
Well, yeah.
some
Like,
people can't take it though.
right. Well, you have to learn how to take feedback first, and then you have to learn how to, regardless of how it's given, perhaps you have to learn how to separate the feedback which is not about you as a person, but as
Right.
the action you're taking or not taking or whatever. And then hopefully if you learn how to take feedback, then you are better equipped to give feedback because you have a sensitivity that you've developed from the experience of receiving it and what has worked for you and what has not worked for you.
Right.
And then you can turn around and provide that to other people. And it's not obviously a one-to-one relationship. Nothing's perfect, but
Right.
you hopefully can grow from that experience of receiving feedback and then do your best effort to provide it to other people. And then you have to refine and you take the individual personality into account and everything else and how many times you've had
So
to address
important.
something
Thinking
or
of different
whatever.
personalities is such a key to leadership.
Yeah.
Understanding this person can be more blunt. They like, hey, this, fix this. I love you. This, boom, boom, boom. Let's get to the point. Like, I'm more like that.
Yeah.
But also, like, don't be a total jerk, but let's move. I understand
Yeah.
you're not, but some people it's not, but it's just, how do we get that productive together, like unified end goal? Everything takes more time than I'm going back to the whole, I love cliches thing, but everything takes more, like every idea is going to usually take way more time to become a reality than you think, but you're also capable of doing way more than you think you can do.
Yeah.
So it's almost like we underestimate what we think we can do, but we overestimate how quickly we think that idea is. Well, maybe I'm speaking for myself.
No, I think you're totally right. Like a good quick example of like, so we're next week or so, we're going to be releasing a new colorways of existing prints. And, the idea for that was at the beginning of the year. And, Jason and I were talking about it and, I was like, well, this won't take very long at all. Like all the artwork is ready. We just need the new colors. And ironically, Jason and I both have like a degree of red-green color blindness. And so outside of like
that's crazy because like your stuff, you would never be able to tell.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, I've got a lot of workarounds. And so
Right.
the workaround in this case, also because we're busy, is like I hired some friends to like, hey, like you guys are familiar with the brand, et cetera. Like we need like a seasonal colorway. These are some thoughts that we had. Could you develop some for us? And so pass it off to them. And so then like something that in my mind was like, well, we could, if we had the colors right now, we literally could order this. Like we could send it to the printer and we could have it in, like 10, 14 days, whatever the turnaround time is for the printer. But then what actually happened, which is totally fine. I mean, this is just what happens. It's like, okay, well, we're going to hire them rather than he and I trying to argue over colors that we can't see. Right. Like, okay, like
of course, like you guys, I just think it's so perfect. Like everyone thinks like you just always have this natural full talent that you're getting. It's like that's only a piece. Like skill is a muscle. Like of course you're colorblind
fight for it
as a designer.
Right.
Like it's like Mozart was deaf. Like
yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
But it takes excuses away though. Like there's always a way to. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So, we sent it to them and, they did like a round of like, hey, here's a couple different possibilities. And, we were like, okay, something here is like on, this is in the direction, but it's not quite it. And here's what we're thinking, why, and then sent it back to them. And it was like another week and then got that. And it's like, okay, we got a set of colors that we like. They picked out the paper stocks that we're going to use, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It feels right for a variety of reasons. So, there's like 2 to 3 weeks invested in that and then sent it off to the printer. And then of course, the first thing, the printer sends back is like, hey, 3 of these paper stocks are like discontinued and we can't get them anymore. Fuck.
Yeah, right.
It's not like an ink. It's
One
like
more time. That stupid cheesy dad joke's never gonna get old to me, Brian. Sorry.
It's and so it's like,
sense
well,
of
what
humor as a 2-year-old. Go ahead.
Well, like, what are we gonna do? It's like we can't just pick some other random paper because it's a very specific paper that's like a color paper. It's not like a different shade of white. It's like, oh, it's a pink or it's a blue or it's a yellow or it's like it's so then
right. It's a certain type of,
and we've picked the inks to match that paper. And, if the paper's a little different, then the inks have to change. And I'm like, well, I don't want to go back and like wait another week of visual revisions, and who knows if the paper is going to be available or not.
Right.
So And then it was like, well, I was just determined. I said to the printer, like, hang on, I'm going to see if I can find it. So Jason and I just went like website to website from all these different, we couldn't get it direct from the manufacturer because they were out, but there are like, warehouses that carry it. So it was just like, we need to find, 100 sheets of this at this size. And so it was just like, go down the list of like email, call, submit contact forms to all these different places. And eventually, I mean, it took a couple hours, which unfortunately was not what I planned on doing that afternoon. But like we found the paper, and since, the way that we're releasing a lot of the prints now, we've got a couple of different lines of prints, but this particular line is we do signed editions. So it's like, I don't need to use this paper evergreen forever. It's like, I just need to use this piece of paper for this particular second edition run of these prints, because it's like, we're just going to have these prints, they're going to be these colors, and in 6 months or whatever, when they're all sold out, like we'll do another edition with a different set of colors. And then that's sort of the exclusivity component of like, it's a piece of art. It's not like a mass produced, like, oh, you'll be able to get this forever. It's like, hey, if you like these colors, like there's only 50 of these.
That's
like,
cool.
Get it while you can, because we're not
So the prints
reprinting.
really are limited.
Yeah.
Like literally, and they don't even have the same materials to keep doing.
Right. So
but that's a good example too of like, so many people stop there. Like, sorry, they said the printer says they don't make that paper anymore. And this is like what I teach people on my team. Like, cool. Did you go and Google every other manufacturer in town?
Yeah.
Like, because the 2 hours it takes for that is going to be way less time than redoing
right
the whole thing all over again. Like, there's still, okay, one person, human being, told you it's impossible. They're thinking from their little limited.
Yeah.
But like what you did is exactly like what you have to do to get stuff done. But people don't comprehend that a lot of the time. I wish they taught that more in school.
Yeah, they certainly.
Anyway, I got this whole school thing to go over.
Yeah.
So you guys got those prints out, or they're coming?
Yeah. So we have them. We have them in stock. I just had. We did the photography last week on Friday. So it's on the list of like, we gotta make the product pages in Shopify and everything, and like edit the photos and crop the images down to size and all of that. So they'll start getting released next week. But
that's awesome.
But yeah, they look great. They're really nice, and it's like one of the, it's the first time in a while that we've stepped outside of our black, white, and red colors to just like, we've got these prints. They're popular.
That's cool.
But it's like, we do want to continue to focus on this limited edition thing, and it's like, we want to continue to offer these prints, but like we want to have people feel that exclusivity is like, here's a unique thing. It's only available for
I like that
a certain amount of time, and then it's gone, and we'll move on to the next thing. And also helps to keep our product lines fresh and everything else.
For sure. Well, you got to go through. You have to like keep innovating.
Wow. Yeah, and it's also
it's on point still with your brand, everything you guys do. But it's like people call it like rebranding, but it's not. I hate when people say that. There's like it's like you're constantly upgrading.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, dude, if I'm not sitting here with a typewriter in front of me, I have a MacBook. I'm not rebranding. It's like the MacBook works way better. Yeah.
Right.
It's like, if I only was using a typewriter, we would not have a show. Or we're not sitting here in a radio station, because that would be a huge waste of money compared to what a podcast studio. It's like, that's not rebranding. It's like you're continually upgrading to stay relevant.
Yeah.
You know? I don't know. It's weird. Some people can get stuck in that rut too. It's scary sometimes, because you can put yourself out there you are being judged. You can fail. You will fail. But it's like, okay, well, we've failed before.
Yeah.
That's why. Shadow's going to join the show now. I think my wife's back. So, come here, buddy. Come on. This is a part of the podcast which we've done, I think, in the past like 8 episodes, where Shadow joins us on air when he starts barking.
Hi, Shadow.
Shadow, say hi. But yeah, my wife's just flying back in. I would like, actually, this is going to be something I want to hit up towards the end. It's a perfect little Andy we were talking about yesterday too. But Shadow, you want to do that in the mic? Come on. what other podcasts you have Shadow just randomly? Come on, do it for everyone. Come on, buddy. I need to teach him to do some cool tricks or something.
Shadow's like, I don't work on demand.
Yeah. He
Treat-
wants to start
treats-
getting his royalties.
Yeah, treats need to be involved here.
So like Samuel L. Jackson, if anyone listening to this doesn't know who I feel like that's a name that really doesn't need
Oh no,
any explanation.
no, I don't think so.
I mean, Pulp Fiction, I can just snakes on a plane.
yeah, all of the Marvel movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
He mentions your, like, dude, when you have someone, and you're going to share the story behind it because it's still cool. The fact that, like, when Samuel L. Jackson is mentioning your guys' work, I think is, like, pretty, I'm going to have to say it, fucking cool. Yeah. Shadow even thought it was cool. I know, she's here, buddy. You want to go out there really bad, huh? So, yeah, we're filming and Shadow's barking. Can I put him out there? Here, Shadow. So, dude, you would think with almost 300 shows. Everyone, you know me too well. The reason people like this more, I won't edit this out. Like, I should. Everything says I should. But
yeah,
like a producer would be like, dude, you got to. And someone will probably comment like, dude, that was the best part was like your dog. No, they wouldn't say that. The best part
yeah,
is like
been
you
really
stopped
fucking
and,
boring.
like, yeah.
Man, I can't believe I made it through like the 3 hours just for that one dog part. Like, please don't have him back on again. It's fine. I know what you're saying. All right, let's get to the Sam Jackson story. Then maybe you'll finally have something interesting to say.
No, dude. You all listening, it's cool because like you're just sitting in the room with us having a conversation. And that's really what we're doing. Like we're all just having a conversation together with Shadow. And it's not that stage fake. Yeah, we got like the awesome studio and everything, but that's why I like it. There was a time where I would have been all, we got to edit that out. And I get it with some, and the reels and stuff we make, but yeah, we're still, I don't think it's live, but I'm just putting off the real quick. You want to go, buddy? But no, that's not the best part of the show.
It might be. I won't be hurt if you feel that way.
And
all right,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're back. That's in case we edit it, but we won't. So Samuel L. Jackson, I can't. You know what's great is like he's so on point with your brand. I would love to see him doing like a commercial for you guys one day. Yeah, remember those like the beer? Like he was like yelling. He'd be perfect for this.
Yeah. So the story behind that was there's a famous professor in the fashion industry, Louise Wilson, who's taught at Central St. Martin's in the UK, and so some number of years ago, like she had our poster and she would reference it in classes. And of course, we found all this out after the fact, but she passed away, I think, in 2014. And at the British Fashion Awards in 2014, they had like a tribute to her. And as part of that tribute, you know, they were showing. You can actually look this up somewhere on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm trying to right now. I'm listening to you, but I'm just trying to.
But yeah, part of that tribute, they had Sam Jackson reading
that's
our. No, that's Louise Wilson. No. But Sam Jackson like read our poster during the presentation, sort of at a slow pace. So yeah, that was kind of the brief connection to Sam Jackson.
But the fact that she recognized you guys' work and loved it so much that they at a point even thought that it was her work.
Yeah.
Shows how much respect that
she
like
used
an
to,
icon has for your guys' stuff.
Yeah. We were talking.
I think that's really cool.
Mm-hmm,
did you guys think that, or were you just like, no, wait, that's our work? Like, were you thinking like, dude, that's pretty awesome that they're talking about us?
Well, so I didn't find out, like, I didn't find any of this out. I knew that Louise Wilson was a person in the fashion industry, and I knew that she had passed away because, like, at her funeral, they had put like some of the poster quotes up, like at her funeral, and I had seen those pictures just circulating on social media again, 2013, 2014. And then, and that was it. It was like, oh, okay, well, there's this woman, I know that she's a important person, and whatever.
Yeah.
And then it was really sometime when I don't remember if it was related to the first book proposal or what, but somehow I was like trying to remember her name. It was like, oh yeah, there was that woman. I need to include like our press that we've had or whatever.
Right.
And then I was like stumbling through, and then I came across like Louise Wilson Tribute 2014 British Fashion Awards, and then I was like, oh, you could see some of this woman's work or whatever, and then it was like, that's Sam Jackson talking. It's like a pre-recorded thing that had been done. And I'm like, that's my poster. Huh. Well, fancy that. Like, no idea. Like 4 or 5 years later, like just totally like, well, apparently that happened. So I mean, certainly was thrilled about it. I kind of wish that there would have been attribution because that would have been beneficial.
Right. But I mean, there wasn't exactly attribution, but really there was, because it is your poster and
right.
They're respecting it even without knowing.
Yeah.
Like there's times where I've shared like quotes or something and I'm like, I know I didn't say that. Like someone amazing said that and I didn't know exactly who it was, but it's respecting the thing that it like got imprinted enough in them to want to like present that as part of it.
Yeah. Well, and it's a similar story where we did get the proper attribution was in 2015. There was a New Yorker article about Johnny Ive, who was the former, design director for Apple, the chief design officer.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay.
He designed the iPod, and I mean, his relationship with Steve Jobs is the subject of many a book at this point,
right?
And all of that, and we I want to say it was like probably 2011, we received an order from his like chief of staff saying like, hey, Johnny loves your poster, we'd like wants to order it for like the whole design team and everything. So we had sold like him indirectly like probably a dozen prints for him and all of these people, and but it was like a private transaction. It wasn't something that was appropriate for us to like publicize, right?
Yeah, you should have asked him.
Yeah. And so,
but I get it.
And then in 2015, like we had gotten, somebody reached out that was like a writer from the New Yorker, and just said like, hey, I have some questions about your poster. We're doing an article about somebody, but didn't say who, and just would like, some confirmation. Would you say, would you describe your poster this way or that way? Or, just kind of some very innocuous questions. And, so I wrote the email back. I was like, hey, thanks for the interest. Like, yeah, this, that, and here's a little bit of info about the poster. Like, no big deal. Let us know when the article's coming out, because could be anybody. Certainly, probably nobody that I know.
Right. Well, you didn't know, yeah.
Yeah, and then I remember because I was still teaching at the university at that point. I'd finished grad school, but I had like a upperclassman, like a senior class that I was teaching, and I had my phone in my pocket and I'm running critique, and it keeps like vibrating, like ding, ding, ding. And it's like, I'm just getting order after order after order. It's like the Shopify notifications, like, like, oh, well, usually I'm used to like a few of these a day, not like, every like couple minutes, like bing, 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 like what's going on? And, but I'm teaching class. Like I could, sort of like subtly look at my phone, like, oh, we're getting a bunch of orders, but I don't know why. So, finished teaching class and, everybody's walking out, and then I'm like, pull my phone out. And I'm like, wow, we've had like a ton of orders in the last like 40 minutes. Like, but I don't know why.
Wow.
And so then it's like, and then I pull my laptop out because the interface is a little bit clearer on, desktop than it is in the mobile. And I'm like looking, and I'm trying to like figure out what the traffic source is for this. And then it's like, oh, NewYorker.com. And so I go to the website, and there's like, because it's not like the specific link to the article, it's just the general domain.
Okay.
And then it's like, oh, there's an article about Johnny Ive. And then I'm like, and I click on it, and then I'm like looking, and then it's like in the first, I don't know, not the first few paragraphs, but fairly early on in the story, that the author of the article is talking about visiting Johnny Ive's office and how in his office he's got two posters. One is a Banksy print and one is our print. And he briefly talks about the poster and, describes it, and then
That's cool.
from there, because he's such a
Have you ever tried reaching out to him?
yes,
Okay.
no luck.
Go ahead.
But there's been all of these different
Come on, Johnny.
yeah, seriously.
Anyone listening to the show that knows Johnny, I know one of you do. Hook us up. They got to connect. Dude, honestly, with the right person, he would probably be like, dude, of course. Like his prints we've had in our office or theirs, like they're freaking awesome.
Yeah, it would be great.
Connect us, connect him. We'll have Brian's info on here.
Yeah.
Link him up.
Yeah. So,
dude, Elon Musk would love your stuff. I could see him having your stuff up too. Elon, if you're listening, because I know you listen to every one of these shows.
Right. He's got all that free time.
Yeah. Get it. But yeah, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So, they referenced it in that article, and then, all sorts of other publications kind of trying to piggyback off of the traffic, where like Business Insider or whatever, like, see the poster that's in Johnny Ive's office. And so, like, through this amalgam of all these other, like second and third hand stories about it, was like with links direct, because the New Yorker article did not link directly to it. It just described the poster.
Right. That was going to say that would be amazing if they would have put a link right to your.
But all of these other publications that are, not the fancy New Yorker, but like,
right.
They're like, hey, check this out. You can get this here. And so all of a sudden it was just like, we were inundated with orders, like way more than, and we weren't prepared for it. I mean, we didn't have like a fulfillment center at the time. Like we were.
Was it like that crazy, like that much of a tidal wave? Just,
oh my God. It was, we
that's
did,
cool.
we did more sales like in 6 weeks than the rest of the year combined, basically.
Wow.
And
that's
again,
insane.
We were operating out of the house we were renting in graduate school still. There was, we had friends of ours that were like employees that we paid, and they came in and filled orders, and everything was done in the basement, and we didn't have the inventory to match it. But basically we just turned inventory tracking off, and we like called our printer and we're like, print a bunch of these. And then my former business partner, Jason, his dad runs a paint and wallpaper and glass store in Eastern Ohio. And so he would make frames for us. And then we like the most expensive item that we had and still have on our store are framed versions of, the screen printed prints, like the more expensive prints. And so, he was just basically working 24/7. I mean, we would constantly, we would have to drive out to his place, or he would come out and just fill like his van or one of our cars with stuff. And it was just like, doing the framed prints the way that we'd have to, like, we'd get the frames from him, and we'd have to like disassemble part of it, put the poster in, like take care of the glass, then reassemble it, then package it. And of course, like, it's one thing to roll a poster, but like to pack a frame, you've got corners you have to put on, wrap it in bubble wrap, you put it in a box. It's like, it's a lot more extensive process. It takes like 10 to 15 minutes to like do one frame versus like.
Have you learned by having some of them break when you ship? Because we have candles also for Dreamshine, and we've had chocolates too. We have to get we've had them break, and then I'm like studying packaging with candles. I'm like, oh, they're like, we triple wrapped it. I'm like, yeah, that's why they have this cardboard. There's like some type of engineering.
Yeah. The frames, no, we by the time we had been selling frames, we had made tons of mistakes with shipping. That those we were like super careful, partly because, it's also the biggest expense on our end. We've got the highest quality product, like the prints in it, and then the frames themselves. And so, I mean, not that you ever want to be like unconcerned about the products, but if you have less expensive products that you're selling and a good profit margin, it's, if they get damaged, it's like, well, that happens sometimes. But when you've got more of those high ticket items, and it's a high ticket item for you to invest in, and also, it's like, it's not easy because partly why it's expensive is because it's not easy to make. And so, he cut all of those frames by hand, and it's like this process. So especially when you've got a ton of orders for that stuff happening,
and just said, well, you're doing this from your like house still at this point. Like you guys are all grad students,
right?
Grinding it out,
right?
In the house that,
right? Yeah.
The wind chimer.
Yeah.
They're grinding it out in there and it was just talked about like in New Yorker.
Yeah.
Which is cool. It just goes to show people, like, everything starts like in a garage, in the basement of the wind chimer,
right?
Whatever it may be. And it's not like a lot of people wait. they keep thinking like, oh, until I get into the New Yorker, then I'll start. And it's like, no, you guys got futured in there, not even by trying, by doing what you were doing, and someone liked your work and bought it. And you
Yeah.
know what I mean? It wasn't like some people always think like, oh, you have to have this perfect strategy. And it's like, dude, so many strategies, like when you reverse engineer them are not.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because, a little while ago, maybe a month or a month and a half ago, there was, one of those Facebook posts that's like Facebook memories. It's like something from 10 years ago or whatever. And it was a post that I had made. One of the other like sort of like brushes with celebrity that we had in the early 2010s, there was a lot of like flash sale websites. You remember like fab.com maybe?
Yeah.
And they were basically like these
Yeah.
companies that like, I mean, they were valued at like, I don't know, a ridiculous amount of money. I don't know if it was billions or not. And then like overnight, like collapsed. But
A
their
lot
model
of
was
the
basically like
.coms. Yeah.
they curated a selection of, in the case of like fab.com, like a selection of like highly designed artifacts.
Mm.
And so they would do these flash sales. And what they would do is they would buy up a certain inventory direct from us, and then they would sell that at a cheaper rate. And so then people that had like, I don't remember if it was a subscription or whatever, but like they had access to these things at a discounted rate. And so
Oh,
it was
that's
good
how
for
they
us
made.
because we could sell like,
That's
I
an
remember
interesting
we had like
business
a
model.
$30,000 order from them early on, and it was like, oh my God, like,
That's awesome.
and so we would do that and whatever. But so the winter of one of those when Fab was still big, probably 2011, 2012, like Ashton Kutcher had like a selective list of his favorites, and I don't know, somehow he was involved. I don't know if he was just like celebrity marketing or if he had a stake in the company or what, or I'm sure he didn't actually pick anything. It was just,
He might have. Like you'd be surprised. Hey, we've had a lot of different like movie directors. I had just reshared from RJ Mitty from Breaking Bad.
Mhm,
Had the director of remember the original Lawnmower Man?
mhm.
He's been on here. Dude, he talked about working with Stephen King. Ah, of course I forgot your name. You know me. We stay in touch. He's awesome. But one of you guys knows Ashton Kutcher. Ask him if he really picked it out. And Ashton, if you did, we would love to talk to you about it and get in touch with Brian.
Yeah.
And dude, no, I could see him personally picking that. Like, why would your guys' stuff's great? Like, I see him
Oh,
being
sure,
like, that's
yeah.
badass. But anyway,
But
he was with like, was there a picture of him?
oh, well, yeah, we're kind of like story inside of a story inside of a story. But basically, so that happened, and so jumping back out to the top level here in on Facebook, there's those memories, and so I had posted something like, "Oh, Ashton Kutcher has selected our print as this thing. Does this mean we've made it?" And so then, I reposted that 10 years after the fact or whatever it was, like a couple weeks ago, and said like, well, being over a decade out from this, I can unequivocally say no, it was not the indication that we had made it.
It's going to be when he
Yeah.
responds here soon.
Hindsight is 2020 on that, but it was kind of just tongue in cheek, playful thing.
That is cool though. Well, it's crazy what people can perceive is made it like on media or whatever when someone you could have something featured by a celebrity or like my guy Dave Ramsey up here,
Mm-hmm.
his book Entree Leadership, such a good book on business. They mention me with a lot. He has a great story about they kept being like, dude, you got to get on Oprah Winfrey show. That's when you've made.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, they offered us with his other book. It was a New York Times bestseller.
Mm-hmm.
They kept offering a beat and they were like preparing their whole production and getting all these books ready to print. And then they got like pushed back on the list like 20 different times. And then it became like an ongoing joke. But then like 15 years later, they had built up a really successful company
Mm-hmm.
and then got called to be on. And he's like, in my head, I thought that means we've made it. He's like, then when I went on, I ended up arguing with her because we didn't agree on finances.
Uh-huh.
And the whole thing was like a disaster. And in our heads, we thought that means he's like, because someone told me until you're on Oprah, that's when you really get your big break. He's like, but the truth is you create your own big breaks. And it's like, that can be a defining moment, but it's like everything you've done to get to the point to be at a level to be on something and be able to like sustain it, or people can be on something like that and just come and go. And
Yeah.
someone like the boring behind the scenes crap is what I'm trying to motivate everyone to know,
Yeah.
to not let that discourage you from thinking that you're not like on the right path.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Or the Ashton Kutcher effect, or just which by the way is cool. Like that's awesome that you guys were on that. I'm really not surprised as well. So with the next like prints that you have coming out, and I want to let everyone again know where to like contact you, connect you, and also like with the release of your book, just like as we're getting closer to finishing, when did this officially launch?
So this launched at the end of 2019. I think it December 30th or December 31st. So it was like right before the pandemic and
I remember you telling me that.
and all of that. Yeah. And so part of, what we had started doing for like after Jason left and Jason Richburg had started, sorry for the confusion. It keeps things easy for me. Like everybody I work with is named Jason. So if there's a problem, it's always Jason's fault. And that's, keeps my life simple.
Yeah, you got two Jason co-authors and the other Jason.
Yeah, who had lived with us.
Yeah.
So yeah, keeps things simple and complicated simultaneously, like most of life. But we had started doing workshops, and we had been doing workshops we ended up doing workshops for like Nike and Adobe and some other like high level companies. And part of
That's awesome.
what we hoped that the book would do, aside from just releasing the book and all of those things, is to help us to develop more of that that business, because we had kind of developed this proprietary workshop, and
now to have the book is like,
right
now Nike's bringing you in. We've got your book for all the team members that are coming to which by the way, I got it just for my leadership team, and my neighbor that recommended it has a big security like surveillance company. He buys it for every new team member. It's their that's
so great.
That's his company.
Yeah.
He's in Spain right now. I just told him you were here. He's like, of course. His house is right behind us, but this is like I swear to God, this is their mandatory company read. And when they go to hire people, he has your book out on their table. And part of their thing is how they respond to it. I swear to God, I'm not kidding. You would never think of that which is so cool. He screens people out if they don't like you guys' book. He's like,
I think we get along.
That's his culture. You will. And I'm like, dude, what a great way, because that's their culture. And he's like, I can already, if someone's like appalled and they can't, I already know they're not going to be a good fit for our culture. So why bother? If someone starts going through it and they're like, oh, I love how it's like, don't effing give up here. He's like, we're already starting on the right path, but they'll have them. They know they're being taped because it's all surveillance, but he sets it in the table. I promise you, he told me this whole story.
Yeah.
And they'll come in for the interview. They'll sit there and he watches on the camera how they if they look at it, and he say, some will be like, and like put it away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he already is like,
nope.
Go tell them it's been a good, and they have no idea. I'm like, dude, that sounds like a psychology experiment. But how cool is it that your book is and he buys it for them once they're on, and it's their first mandatory read. That's so cool.
That's pretty great.
And it's not like you're done yet. Like Nike definitely, COVID sucked with a lot of things. But now they're bringing people back in, because I could totally see them like being like, oh, we're throwing a leadership thing, or it's so like spot on with
Well, so what we started developing,
just effing do it instead of just do it.
We started developing our workshop, which is called the Art of Risk Taking, which was like the idea for the workshop was born out of, like, we were doing a lot of lectures and speaking engagements, through the first 6 or 7 years. We got to travel internationally, Europe. We did a tour around the country, and we did like 25, 30 events. And so we're probably somewhere 75 to 100
That's awesome
events since we started. And we had done like some workshops usually with like colleges and universities. We'd work with students, like they'd have us lecture Friday night, and we would do like some design exercises during the day Saturday for the students, and then that was
That's
it.
cool.
Which was cool. It was fun, and we enjoyed doing that. But then at some point, like in 2015, 2016, we were kind of like, well, what would a workshop look like that's a little more specific around GFDA? Like, we were teaching good stuff in the design workshop, but it was like, we're not like, we have a studio component to our business, but what Jason and I were involved in day to day was not like making logos, although that's something, again, that we can do and we have team members that do.
Right.
But it's like, that's not, lots of people can offer that. What can we offer from our experience of starting this company, naming it with the profanity, doing all these crazy things? And, we were like, well, the art of risk taking sounds like, a great name. And much to our surprise, like, I looked around everywhere, like nobody used that name. And I thought for sure, like, we came up with a name. It's like, there's got to be like 15 other people that have that. And it was like, nope, that's us. Like, just us. Amazing. So,
yeah, because that was the art of like stuff was, yeah, you would think that would have been.
Yeah. So, from there, like, we were like, okay, well, we're going to do this workshop. We had a very loose idea of what that meant, but we didn't have like exercises built out or anything, this. So we put on the website, like, yeah, we do lectures, we do this workshop. It's called The Art of Risk Taking. And I wrote like 4 sentences about, in theory, what this would be, unbeknownst to everybody that would happen upon it on the website. Like, we actually hadn't built the workshop yet.
That's always the way it works.
Right.
But when you're so committed,
mm-hmm.
That's what people do. It's not like the thing is, when someone would hire you,
mm-hmm.
because we're so committed, you're going to make sure you over deliver. And if you don't, you'll be like, dude, I'll come back again. That's the difference between those where they don't do that and then they like do a terrible thing because they're not, but you don't know exactly how, and you figure out along the way, but
right,
you're committed to it.
Well, and that's exactly what happened. So we put that up on the website and, thought like, okay, well, we'll come back to this in 6 months or whatever, and we'll kind of play around with thinking about exercises. But like a week and a half later, somebody from Nike corporate contacted us. And
of course, it's like it's not just a small...
Right. Yeah. We're just diving into the deep end. And so this guy called and wanted to, talk. And so I talked to him, and
Ashton Kutcher saw that and he called Nike.
Right. Like, hey, dudes, you should hire these people. So I had this conversation with a guy who had seen our poster somewhere. And then he was trying to figure out what he was going to do for this retreat for his team. And, he was wasting time. He couldn't figure it out. And he's like, oh yeah, I want to get that poster. So then he would like search the poster, found our website, and then saw that we did workshops. And he was like, this is fucking perfect.
Yeah.
And so like, I'm talking to him on the phone, and he was like, well, tell me about your workshop and what you guys do. And of course we don't have a workshop. We just have the idea of the workshop. And so I was like, well, well, tell me a little bit about what you're looking for. And, whatever he listed, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what we do, and he was like, oh, that's great.
We tailor it to you. So yeah.
Yeah. So we ended up, we had about a month and a half to figure it out, and we did like
what were they looking for?
It's kind of what a
like,
lot of,
to sum it up, kind of what was it like?
Well, so they wanted like exercises that would engage their employees and help to create a cohesive culture. But that culture specifically, like for Nike and anybody we work with, is usually, it's like the industry buzzword of like innovation or disrupting or whatever. And it's like, well, how do you build that into your culture? How do you cultivate it is probably the better way to think about it. And like that with the business name, like Good Fucking Design Advice, and a workshop called The Art of Risk Taking. It was like, that's what we want. We want people to push the envelope. We want people to feel comfortable with each other, to like push the envelope. And, we didn't. And
now with a book.
This is before the book though.
I know. That's what I was thinking. In the future, or now, with a book, when they have you come back, that's going to be awesome. But yeah, go ahead.
So we did a workshop with them. It went really well. I mean, compared to what we do now, it's like, that was the first iteration, and we're way more refined, and we've got like real clear objectives with our exercises. And nonetheless, it still was a good workshop, because they had us back, and we worked with another a larger team about 6 months later that same year. And then, over time we started picking up, like we went to Europe. We worked with a small branding agency there. And, we've worked with anything from like 15-person agencies to, Fortune 100 companies,
That's so cool.
and sort of tailored the workshop. And we've learned a lot through the experience of doing it with this multiplicity of like PR firm to, like this huge company that houses multiple brands to,
Right.
like Nike or Adobe and things like that. And it's been really interesting, the observation of like, there's a lot of things where you can tell like how healthy the teams are by how successfully they're able to engage with the exercises. So we have like, we've built out these exercises, and when we do workshops, we're always like trialing new ones. We kind of like, well, we know how these ones will work, and we want to make sure that we're offering a good experience for the people that, have hired us. But then
Right.
also on our end, like, well, it's called the risk taking. So we're like throwing out like exercises that we've never done before.
I
And
like
like, we
that.
have no idea how this is going to go or what the outcomes are going to be. And, so we're peppering those in concert with like things that we have a pretty good, idea of like what's going to happen and how we can guide people along the process. And, the combination of those, I think, makes for a very authentic experience where, in some cases we're learning right alongside the people that are, doing the workshop.
That's cool though. That's the best way. Like you're immersed, you're teaching and you're like experiencing it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it keeps,
It's not just some generic,
keeps
like
it real.
you've got your what like I'm really curious to know what are some of the things that you can tell if a team is disconnected from like one of the things that you guys do? Is it like how they is it if they're all well obviously if they're like lethargic and like oh god we have
Well,
to,
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a telltale, but like is there a more not obvious
Yeah,
type one?
there's kind of some levels. So I don't want to like our workshop exercises are proprietary, and not because it's like some sort of like legal thing or anything, but it's mostly that like if anyone were to hire us, even it's one of the challenges we have when selling our workshop is we generally won't tell anybody what the exercises are that we're going to do.
Right.
Partly because
Like
like
maybe give it without I get what you're
yeah, yeah,
saying,
yeah.
like you don't want to give away the exact because people pay you for that specific, but maybe just like
Well,
somewhat of an example or
yeah, but it's also like if I tell you what the exercise is and how it works, then that ruins the experience of it. And most of the people that are that are hiring us are
oh
going to be involved in it. And so it's kind of like if I describe the exercise and how it works and why, that kind of gives you the answer to the experience. And then
mm,
it's like, and then it ruins it for you. But then if you're on a team and then, you have the answer kind
they
of
could
like
like
you,
cheat.
yeah, yeah, and it just takes away from the experience. So again, it's not so much about the proprietary aspect, like it's some sort of fucking brilliant thing, but it's
Right.
more
Well, it
just
sounds like
like
it is though,
I mean, yeah, I
in a
suppose,
sense.
but
Yeah.
it's that like we just don't want to ruin the experience for people that are going to engage with it. But that all of that being said, um, so one of the exercises we do uh is it's a challenge where you're having to build something without instructions, and so there's a clear uh final thing that you're supposed to have, but
Mhm.
we haven't given you the roadmap for how to get there. And so you can tell by how well the group of people work together and if they're able to successfully accomplish it in the tight time frame we give them or not.
Mm.
And so, what we've seen over the, number of times that we've done this is that when you have like so people they're mixed in random teams of like 5 or 6 people. If you
Right.
have a good mix of people and they work together, then generally they can complete the task right at the buzzer.
Mm.
If it's a team of a bunch of like executives and they have a hard time sharing power or like letting one person lead and everybody else follow,
Oh, really?
then what you end up with is
That's
a bunch of
so
people that
fascinating
are
to me.
arguing over like how to do a thing rather than actually
Mm.
executing and moving forward because they can't like
Like ego is
egos
getting
involved or whatever.
wow.
Or in some cases like if you have a bunch of people that have the same experience, doesn't necessarily have to be executive, then
Right.
you tend to run into that. But the most successful
That's
teams
so interesting.
end up being like some amalgamation of like higher up to intern and like a project manager, and you have this breadth of people with different experiences, and everybody can kind of find their role, and then we can talk about this like how this all works. So like for instance, like some of the really healthy organizations we've worked with are able to accomplish that building task in
Like with the really healthy ones too, do you see that they're able to accomplish it even if it is batch where it's all the executives,
yeah,
all
yeah,
because they
yeah.
still have a culture of the main goal is to solve the problems no matter who. It's not about titles. It's about
Yeah. Yeah, and
like,
I
have you
would say
seen
that we've never had a workshop where every team completes that exercise perfectly.
right,
But
right.
like with the good organizations, like Adobe, for instance, when we worked with them a couple of years ago, like they hit it out of the park. And so the first level is like, oh, well, we'll
That's
kind of talk
interesting.
like through three different experiences without
The
naming names. Although I just said that Adobe did a really great job, so good for you guys if anyone's listening from your
Adobe
organization.
did great. Nike didn't. Just joking.
Well, we didn't do this exercise with
I'm
Nike,
just
so
messing around.
but we worked with an organization that was very clearly deeply unhealthy. And what happened with them was their CEO was on a team, and the way in which he approached solving the problem was to go around to other teams and steal some of the components that were necessary for the build. And so then they couldn't complete it. And so it was like, it's like
Like jokingly.
he thought it was jokingly, but it's like it's revealing, right?
Hmm,
It's like the way you do anything is the way you do everything. Like here we are, we're at this retreat. It's
so
supposed to be
true.
fun. It's very clear that the objective is like you're in like a friendly competition with all the other teams, and
Right.
you're trying to complete this thing. And it's like the CEO's solution was to go and sabotage the other team so that they couldn't complete the work. And it's like, well,
Which
how
everyone learns from the top
right. And like how does that
down.
behavior manifest in your organization? It's like that's something to really think about. And that's kind of like we do these goofy exercises, and
Dude, that says a lot. Yeah.
part of the reason why we make these goofy exercises is because it allows people to like do weird things like that. And we have to pay attention as facilitators to what's happening, so that when we have like that post exercise discussion and facilitation, that we can like point these things out. And because
Hmm.
and it's helpful because none of the exercises we do are anything like what you would do in your normal job. So
I love.
that
Well, I could imagine with a. I just want to. I'm selling you guys because I believe in you. I have a company. We've hired people. I've been hired to do like stuff like that,
yeah.
speak, but also have hired but I haven't seen it in a way. I'm only imagining from your book, and I'm not even saying this as an example, but just like requit commitment requires. It's not edited. Fucking sacrifice, because this is one of my favorite ones. The A, possibilities, and the B is the danger, and it's a circle. If you're listening, it looks kind of like Pac-Man.
It's like a pie chart. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the real term. To me, it's
Well, it
Pac-Man.
does look like Pac-Man, but
But it is like a pie chart, and so A is the majority of it, and there's more possibilities. B's the little sliver of the pie, and
Mhm.
that's the danger. But we we, including me, all of us, overly focus on the B, the danger, and don't realize there's so much more possibilities than there are danger. Obviously, I know you know this because you designed it,
Well, yeah.
but I'm explaining it to everyone listening to it, and I could see, and I haven't even been to your workshops, but from how you design these and how you're explaining that, I'm sure you come up with some cool creative thing that you can't give away. But I love that, like the different visual components that you might put in with them and a team having to work on something and think outside of that box in different ways, but also putting your like creative form into it.
Yeah.
Cause like it's simple, but it's not. Like to me, that's like, I'm serious. Like that's genius to me. Like it's a pie chart, possibilities, danger, but it's so like profound. Like there's so much in that.
Yeah. Well, that's what we try to do with our communication in general. Um, and and to go to the workshop, it's like, so, that organization was really unhealthy, and that was very obvious from that. And then other organizations we've worked with, that sort of the next tier up is like, well, how many of the teams are able to successfully complete this exercise? And then like the exception to the rule, which is really what we love to see, is like where they take a totally different creative approach with it, and they're building something that they're like breaking the rules, which is kind of the point. It's like, well, that's great. We're here having, this is like what Adobe did. Like we're here, we're having this experience, and the whole workshop's about the art of risk taking. So we're not going to build what the final thing is you told us to build is. We're going to build something totally different. And then the team is like laughing and having a good time, and
That's
there's all of
cool.
this experimentation that's happening, and it's like, how can I use all of these components in a different way than they were intended?
That's
And so
awesome.
that's like, yeah, that's like really like, the A++ S class,
Right. It shows a
like
great culture that
that's what you're really looking for.
I love that.
Yeah, so that was like what we developed the workshop into, which jumps us back to the publication of the book right before the pandemic. And so right as we were, the book came out and we were starting to get a lot of inquiries about our workshops like all over the world and with other various large companies in the US. And we were not quite into the contract stage, but we were having like calls with like all these different places. And we were starting to like loosely schedule dates. And then pandemic happened and it was like, oh, we're going to wait 2 weeks. And I mean, just like what happened to everybody. It's like,
Yeah.
before you know it, it's been 2 years and you're like, well, that's not happening right now.
But it's not done yet either.
Yeah, so we're in talks with a few places now. It's like we're to return to the workshops. And
Have you sent them your book, like the people that hired you from Nike, like
Yes,
as a
yeah,
gift?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So we've followed up with some of them, and so we're hoping to, I feel like now, our whole workshop is centered around the art of risk taking, and the objective of that is like, well, how can you, for your culture, like for your creative culture, like to have innovation in those things, that's part of it. But the other part is like comfort with the other people that you're working with. So if
Yeah.
like if
I
you're
like
going to come
that.
up with ideas, I'm going to come up with lots and lots of bad ones, way more bad ideas than good ones. That's just the nature of developing anything creative, new, whatever. Most of those ideas need to die. Like they just need to go
Right.
away. And so, but if you and I are working together and I don't feel comfortable with you, and I'm not saying even like in some sort of like overt way, but just if I feel like I need to censor myself from like saying the dumb ideas.
Because people will, because a toxic place will ridicule you and
Right.
is trying. They're more about how can I look better
Yeah.
versus get the end.
Well, yeah.
Versus a healthy culture where it does take, dude, we can share stuff here and we might joke and be like, dude, that's stupid, but it's out of love and we're
Yeah.
friends and you'll know, but we're helping come up with the best idea. And then when you come up with something, they're actually going to give you the win for it because it's
Right.
not just about me.
Right, right. And it even comes into like, there's the extremes of like where it's, you can find examples where it's actively discouraged, or like that one company that we worked with the CEO that was like sabotaging people, like, but even on like subtle levels, and it's not like necessarily deliberate. It's just sort of, there's like a little bit of tension or whatever. And it's like through the objective through the workshop is to put these teams of people through like a crucible experience that they can have together. And it creates that bonding, and they've done these ridiculous things and they've experienced this. And then when they go back, it's like, we did such crazy stuff. And, like then when we're sitting around the boardroom table and trying to come up with ideas, it's like we can laugh and we can come up with these ridiculous ideas. And that sort of playful environment,
Yeah.
will generate those ideas. And then these people can work, they can get together behind an idea. And it doesn't matter if you came up with it or I came up with it. It's like, we can sort of universally say like, oh yeah, this is like a great, if it's Nike, it's a shoe, or it's Adobe, it's like a product feature, or, whatever it is for
Right.
that company.
Like
But
we all win together. We all elevate.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. So, I think that now with like the everything kind of has opened back up like post pandemic, and, people are going back to the office. For us, I feel like our offering is, well, you've spent the last, 2.5 years, like not working with somebody like in person, like we can offer you that opportunity to like put all these people in a room together and to do these crazy exercises and make a mess of everything, and remember how great it is to work with another human being and not like stare at a Zoom call. And,
Yeah,
like
where you'd be doing an event and it's like swipe the screen left.
Yeah, it's like, we like,
there's a different energy.
yeah, I'm gonna swear again, but like fuck the metaverse. Like,
Yeah,
let's
we're
get
not, I'm not
together.
worried about swearing on this.
Let's get
episode.
together in person and like hash it out. Like that's like the value of human contact, and being in the space with somebody is so valuable. And I think you're seeing that with a lot of these companies now, that because so many people have pushed back against like coming back into the office at like Apple and Google and Facebook, and
But then they're starting to see the product. I love when to me, I'm like, cool, go start your own company that can do better. It's like,
Yeah.
Or for some, virtually, it's like one thing doesn't work good for all. It's
Right.
like,
Right.
dude, if you're being more productive and it's working well and everyone's unified, cool.
Yeah.
Or these high performance people, but when you're not getting the results for the business to function at the maximum level,
Yeah.
then we've got to make changes. And then when people are like, oh no, I don't, I mean, again, like I go with Elon, I thought it was kind of funny when he was like, dude, Twitter's going bankrupt.
Yeah.
We're and they're like, we don't want to come in. We don't, okay, well, don't come in on Monday and then just don't come back ever because
Well,
we're losing money and we have to make money to pay you.
right.
So you don't have to come in, but you just won't have a job anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people like picketed and see it's like, do that all you want, but like we've got to be productive.
Gotta
But
be.
there is like a special unity that people can get
Yeah.
from.
I wrote my graduate thesis. This is, you know, over 10 years ago at this point, about what was it? Decentralized design management, managing the creative process for a dispersed creative team, something along those lines. A lot of big academic words to sound like I was smarter than I was or am. But
Basically, you're not together like physically in person and dispersed.
yeah. So you've got multiple offices or whatever.
Right.
And you know, it was, you know, unfortunately I didn't follow that path because, you know, I could be way more wealthy now if I had like invested in that, considering everything that's happened and transpired in the last few years. But nonetheless,
But that's short, that's
Well,
not
yeah.
a forever. Yeah.
what I thought I was going to write about in my thesis was more like the technology angle, like how video conferencing works and like how this could be adapted for creative process and like developing ideas and so forth. And you know, it's not like that stuff isn't a component,
It's a tool
but
in the toolkit, but it's not the only tool to use for everything.
right. And so what I
Yeah.
found in the research and like interviewing different agencies and so forth was ultimately it's a communication and trust thing, and it has to do with the relationships of people. And so
Yeah.
like if you would, like
true.
as kind of a simple example of this, like if you and I work in an office together and you know I show up late a couple days in a row and it's like I'm disheveled and it's like I've got a cough, and then you know that I've got like a newborn or whatever, like
Right.
there's all these additional context clues that you can put in, and then you can, like, as either a executive or as a fellow employee, you can like give that person a
It's
bit of grace. It's
so
like
true.
you understand, but like when all of our interactions are this quick like Zoom thing, and it's like, oh well, like, you know, Joe's been like 5 minutes late to the last 3 Zooms, but you don't have all of that additional context. Then what starts to happen is like the trust breaks down,
Mm.
and then there's a resentment that builds up, and then to what I was talking about with the objective of the workshop of like getting people to be able to feel like they can freely and openly share
Right.
their ideas, like all of this starts to break down. And so
It's like a breakdown in leadership too, because what you mentioned before is what we do. And it's like we teach our team to address that quickly instead of, and it's just like you said, in person. Or sometimes they might not even be coming in late, but you notice something's off.
right,
And when we don't do it in front of it, but I'll be like, hey, what's up? Like, I noticed usually, but is something going on? And by that, they're able to be like, actually, yeah, like I have. And sometimes they just needed to have a good conversation with you about
Mhm.
nothing to do with work,
yeah,
something, but just to know like you care and respect for each other because you do.
yeah,
And then they're more productive, and they trust, that builds unity and trust. Like you have certain boundaries, of course, but it's like,
of course,
but you only get that, like, I guess virtually there are ways. I'm not gonna say things impossible, but it's way more different in person.
yeah,
Because you can just tell by like certain body, and that's half of leadership, is that behind the scenes other conversations and
Mhm.
taking time to care, or then also realizing this person's totally negative, toxic, filled with drama. We
Yeah.
need to weed them out.
yeah,
And we're able to see that a lot. And they're like taking other people with them and being toxic to them,
right.
which virtually I can't imagine the gossip and yeah.
Well, it becomes hard. And so if you are going to run like you know, again, everything with a grain of salt, like, you know,
Right.
there's
I'm not
there's
saying it's impossible. Yeah.
yeah, but it's like even if you are going to run a virtual team, like there still are times where getting together in person would be valuable, and you can kind of like use that, and then like it'll wear off, and then you need to like, hit these peaks of like everybody interacting in person. And I mean, maybe that's
Anton, I just told you this. You got to hire them. He has an awesome virtual team, and he was asking advice what are ways they can.
yeah.
And I was like, dude, do something like an event like every 6 months, or I just
Right,
gave a
exactly.
random. If you can't afford to do it do it once a year. Do something like that.
Yeah.
Get a hotel, a conference room. Bring Brian in and his team. Or I'm like, dude, go like do some crazy. You don't have to go skydiving, but you could
Yeah.
like go
Well-
together, go axe throwing, just something where it unifies. But what
Right.
you guys do is even better.
Yeah, I mean, because
'Cause
we're
it's, like,
specifically focused on that, and we in our description of our workshops, like we don't use post-it notes and everything. And part of what we try to do right from the get-go is like, whatever space you're in, it's ultimately like, oh, we're doing a workshop. Everybody's at the round tables, and everybody sits there with their hands folded. It's like, no. like we're like the first exercise or two that we do is like immediately break people of all of that, and it's like
I
we
love
want
it.
you to take ownership of the space. And so our goal is, like by the end of the workshop, are people working in like where they feel comfortable in this room? And sometimes that's a challenge, because like sometimes we're in like an event space, right? And so it's not your space. And in other cases, we'll be actually in the office of somebody that we're working with. But our
Right.
objective in any case is to like wherever some teams begin their work day, like for the workshop, is like they end up somewhere completely different. It's like, we have methods
like
of getting
that.
people to really like analyze the space that they're working in differently. And so,
I
we
really like
feel it's been
that.
like really successful. I mean, there's all sorts of other like interpersonal things, but even, we kind of
That's
look for the basic
cool.
things. It's like, oh yeah, this team started at the table like everybody, because you start with an organized fashion. But like at the end of the day, they're working on the steps, or they're working outside, or they're
love
sitting
it.
on the floor. And it's like, we're not all good little robots at the table, like
Right.
saying what we think we should say. It's like we feel comfortable laughing, making jokes, doing things like, just wandering around and all of that.
And by the way, that stuff happens in the best cultures. Like you get used
yeah.
to not even, you can all be high performers, but you need to intentionally break. And I'm speaking to myself as a owner, and I do stuff like this. And this reminds me to keep doing it. It's not because I'm like, we suck. And I intentionally do it because I know we continually need to do it, because
Yeah.
it doesn't happen. Culture doesn't continue organically. Like you have to intentionally fight for your culture, even in the different creative and unifying aspects of like getting out of your environment. And I know me, I'm just busy working and working and working. So that like helps me. Like people come out, they get out, it helps me out of that shell, out of the thing too. Like
Yeah.
as the owner,
Well, it's there's so many analogies that I could make, but it's like, well, you can't just eat healthy once and then like I'm healthy now, right? It's like it's
a perfect analogy,
it's a habit.
actually.
Or I mean, it's like any relationship requires
So
work,
awesome.
whether it's your marriage or your friendships or whatever. Like there you have to make an investment in that, otherwise things devolve and into whatever. So like when you think about the culture of an organization, it doesn't mean that like, oh, we need to do something every day, but
people
it's like,
assume that because a culture was like this at one time,
yeah,
like say a company's edgy, or I don't know if you read like the full biography on Nike of like how they all started. It was
Yeah.
called Blue. I forget the original name, but it was a really cool story. But anyway, their whole culture was so like brass knuckles, but
mhm.
it still has that. But then you can become a corporation. People can just assume, oh, because it's on our mission statement,
Yeah.
it must be
Move towards entropy.
happening organically.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like, no, it's just like you said with a diet. Like you have to keep intentionally.
Yeah. You have to, the intent is the important part, like actively making the effort that, and I think that people,
that's really cool.
it
Because
doesn't-
I, by the way, everyone listening, I didn't know anything. I didn't know much about your workshops or what you did with that. So like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Like it is to hear that. That's exciting.
And it's, I mean, what I like about our workshops is we make it a lot of fun. And I'll show you some photos and video.
I'm so
off
curious
the record
to see.
to show some of stuff that we get into, and I can tell you about the exercises, but it's a lot of fun for us. It's a lot of fun for the people that we work with, and we see good results with it.
So everyone listening, before we finish up, first of all, where's the best place? And we'll have it all in the show notes, the link to the book, the links to like your social media website, but
Yeah.
just listening, where would be a good place for people to go to check out, say that they want to hire you for a workshop or something, like what would be an easy thing for them?
So like a couple things, you can visit our website, which is just gfda.co. And you can find all of our products on there. You can find signed copies of our book. And if you go into the little menu system, you can find some of our other service offerings, which is our design agency, as well as our speaking and workshop. Is all of the information is on there. If you are on your phone and you just want to skip right to emailing me, you can email me, Brian, Brian, at gfda.co. not .com, just .co.
.co.
And then same thing with our Instagram handle, at gfda.co is Instagram, and those are the primary places where you can find us. We've got Facebook and other things, but we don't really get as much engagement on that, so our main effort is there. If you visit our website, you can sign up for our newsletter and our SMS list, and we've like any sort of product sales that we're doing or new releases. We're looking at sometime in the future, in a year or so, maybe doing hosting our own events versus being called into corporations, which is
I love that.
almost exclusively what we've done so far. And like conferences and stuff we've done to some extent, but a little less of those. So whenever we get around to developing that in the future,
that might be something we could. There's this MMA guy and I were talking about us putting something together with like my thing, his thing, and something like you got even a separate,
nice.
like in Miami, and that would be so cool to like bridge the three and pull the three audiences together.
We'd love to do that.
That would be fun.
Yeah,
as long as he doesn't, my stupid joke I keep saying, because his arms are like this big, doesn't beat any of us up, but
yeah,
he could do some cool stuff. No, I love that. So they could do the events. And also something that I want to tell, I actually have one of the prints right here. It's on the widescreen of the camera. That one. It's follow your. Let me do the arrow. Fucking heart. But I like these other prints and stuff that you guys are doing on there too. And there's another one you and I were talking about yesterday. I wrote it down because you were. Am I not allowed to say this one?
Oh yeah, we can talk about it. We're just working on the proposal for our next book. Can
we say it?
Yeah, we can say it.
Okay, because it's not like it's just it's really cool. If anything, it should get people excited. But I loved it. It's just a lot of your prints and stuff are going off this too. But it just basically says, "Life is fucking short." I can't let you guys see the actual thing beautifully, the way you have the wording and stuff, but please share the message like behind that with everyone listening, because it's such a perfect message we all need reminders of all the time.
So in doing the visuals for it, with the next book that we're working on, the content is a little different than our first one, which is the content in our first book is a little bit about us, and the advice is kind of smarmy and funny, and it's very short, but the way in which Jason's writing has developed over the last couple of years, and also what we've seen as what our audience responds to, is a much more meaningful and sophisticated message. The writing is a bit more sublime, and we get a lot of really positive feedback about that from lots of people. And we've done and are in the process of doing collaborations with different people and companies that are very big on mental health for individuals and so forth. And so anyways, the evolution for this next book is a little bit of a different take on things. And so it is this more meaningful content. And so as a result, the visuals have to develop in a similar way. So as Jason does the writing, he has some things in mind that are inspiring his writing. And then for me, I have to kind of dig into my own personal experiences in life as to like how to develop the visuals for this that are going to be different. And so this one, Jason had written, and I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what specifically he was thinking about that inspired this particular piece of advice. But for me, I have a close friend of mine who's been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and is dying, is terminal. And so the process of developing the visuals for this, like after I read what Jason had wrote, was like that was what just came up for me, and so it was a bit of like personal exploration into what is that, in the design of it, like what does that feel like to me? I mean, I don't know what it's like to be on the other end of that, obviously,
Right.
but it's just like really thinking about that and how, I've had a number of people in my life, because of my martial arts background, and I've different than I think a lot of my friends, where even when I was a teenager, I had friends that were anywhere from my age to 70, right? And it's like that's not necessarily normal for like a 17-year-old to have
Right.
like this breadth of people. And so
It's so cool though.
as a result, you develop these personal relationships with people that are at all these different stages of life, and everything from doctors to like electricians and blue collar workers, and all of this stuff. And um, you know, fortunately, I've had the opportunity to know lots of these people and be inspired by them and moved by them, like this person that I'm referring to here. But also, it's like then I've known a lot of people, particularly in my 30s, that have like passed away in a lot of instances very unexpectedly. And it's just this constant reminder of like life is short. Like it's
Right.
you don't know. It's like one day everything's fine, and then in a moment everything's changed. Somebody, whether it's you or somebody else, is like all of a sudden not there, or you get a diagnosis. And that sort of not to be morbid about it, but like just to like be present with that,
Right.
as as often as possible, and to realize that like you're not going to be here forever, and the people that you care the most about aren't going to be here forever, and you would be very lucky to have a full life. And there's like this I want to say it's like a Buddhist story. It's like Japanese. I may butcher this, but the point will get across nonetheless. So anybody that's familiar with the philosophy, forgive me for the inaccuracy. But there's like I think it's a Japanese story. There's like an emperor that goes to the preacher and says, my son's been born, like a blessing or whatever. And
Oh, I've heard that.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
the blessing
like,
is
well,
like
maybe. Yeah.
like grandfather dies, father dies, son dies, and the emperor's like, what the hell kind of blessing is that? And the priest says, if it happened in any other order, it would cause you great distress. It's like that's thinking about things that way. And so you'd be very lucky to have that sort of experience, but that's not what happens for everybody. It's things happen. So I mean, one, of course, like work really hard and pursue your dreams, but also like don't forget about your family and the important people around you, and don't mistake your productivity for living.
Yeah.
It's like it's gotta there's a balance.
Yeah, and it also tells you too, like, don't, which we all do, me too, like the time we waste dwelling and worrying about stuff that may or may not even come true.
Yeah.
Like life is short. The times we waste with people that are really toxic, that we should just weed the hell out of our lives, or the hours we waste watching the news that's sharing horror story after horror story of the world is ending, and then has you in anxiety for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Like life is short.
Yeah.
Like put that energy, like you said, into your family, into your dreams, into whatever it may be. But it's just,
like if you got hit by a bus tomorrow, would you be happy about the fact that you spent
about the economy, worrying about the economy?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's like
It's important.
it's not that you're like
Right.
disconnected from that, but
Right.
like just the perspective.
Yeah. Yep. I'm already having this has been a great show. So listen, everyone, we'll have everything in the show notes here with my man. I'm going to say it right, Brian Buirge, just like Serge.
You got it.
But with a B, one of the authors of the amazing book right here, Do the Fucking Work, Lowbrow Advice for High-Level Creativity. Also owner of GFDA, Good Fucking Design Advice. Check them out at gfda.co. And never settle, never give up, keep elevating, beyond. Boom.
Thanks.